I called that headbanger back in the day. We were, I don't know what's that genre,
Wait,
Chris? Of
that's your real hair?
yeah.
I wouldn't say glam. It wasn't glam. I
No,
mean,
I wasn't into
it was like
glam. I was
Scorpion
full
style, like
on
Scorpion
Metallica back
style,
then.
right?
You
Oh,
see, God is
Headbanger is the right
fair.
thing, yes.
Oh my
God gave
God.
him
heavy
so much
metal, heavy
hair.
metal.
God
Yeah,
gave him so much hair when he was young. Then now,
I used it all up. So
all your quota.
yeah, what was the breaking news, Johan?
We have a Swedish artist or painter named Lars Vilks. He was killed in an accident yesterday, together with the two policemen that were set aside to protect him. This is not so commonly known, perhaps, outside of Sweden or the northern parts. Lars Vilks did actually make something called the Muhammad characters, caricature. I don't have the English word for it. He made fun and jokes about Muhammad and made a couple of drawings. And he did actually get an I don't know, cease to exist from Iran. That anyone that kills him will get 72 free virgins or something like that. And he was killed in a car accident yesterday hit by a truck, together with the two policemen that were riding together with him. I have no idea how known Lars Vilks is known outside of Sweden, but this is a bone-chilling thing that somebody that has been under the death threat for the last part of 20 years or so, actually now did get killed together with his policemen that were there set aside to protect him. The foil hats will have a field day today, Johan Dan.
So, well, who was driving the truck? That should be easy to figure out.
The thing is, of course, there's the lid on that part, but the truck the truck or the car. The thing is that it's very, very unclear exactly what happened. But if you total a car so hard, so you kill all three in the car at the same time, you hit it pretty dead on. So the thing is that, as usually in Swedish press, when it's something uncomfortable, they don't talk about it. So we will see how this follow up. But they did get a press release out yesterday that it was he that deceased together with his
But
two
even if they just
police.
released the names of the truck driver, that might. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
So they're intentionally not releasing the name of the truck driver, which they obviously know.
Apparently, they say that everybody involved in the accident has had their nearest, at least that they know what have happened. But the thing is here that this will be the head focus of the news in Sweden today. I can say for sure, Johan Dan.
Well, Lars Vilks has been in the news in the U.S. from time to time too. In fact, a woman in Pennsylvania claimed that she pleaded guilty to a murder plot against Lars Vilks last year, and I think wasn't it like 10 years ago that there was another murder attempt, like they tried to burn his house down or
Yeah,
something.
I'm
I mean,
reading.
he
Yeah,
survived like multiple murder attempts in
Right,
Sweden.
I'm reading his Wikipedia page, and it says he did the Muhammad drawings in 2007, so about 14 years ago. And then there was an assassination plot 2 years later in 2009. And then there were violent attacks in 2010 on 3 different instances. And then there was an Al Qaeda. He was put on the Al Qaeda hit list in 2010. And then there was another attack in 2015. And then, yeah, that's it. So, yeah, that's. I was going to say after 14 years, you would think he might be in the clear. Like, people wouldn't continue unless he continues to talk publicly about it. Like, if you went into relative hiding for 14 years, I imagine you would likely have avoided any retaliation. But we'll find out whenever Sweden releases the details of the individual behind this. I imagine they're not revealing the name of the truck driver, and that they're now investigating everything they can about that truck driver to see what their motives were.
yeah. But justice with people that have been on the death list for so long that Even if it's a freak accident, it still is bone chilling.
Okay. So we're going to get into the big headlines here. Before we do, anyone else with something hot over the weekend? Yeah.
Well, the only thing I
Okay,
wanted to ask.
Japan has a new prime minister, Kishida.
And why did Kishida win?
Well, he got majority vote. He's the number 100.
That goes without saying, but why did he get the majority vote?
Well, it's 1 out of 4, right? Anyhow, let's just see how long he can survive. He's the number 100.
Well, why did people vote for him, though?
I don't know. You ask them. I'm not Japanese.
Well, every politician has their own platform as to why you should vote for them. What was he saying is the reason you should vote for him?
I don't vote. I don't vote. I'm not Japanese. I didn't really follow Tyler. Okay. I'm just telling you that he won it. Yeah, that's all.
Tomoko imasu ka?
Yeah, Tomoko-san. Okay, I'll pin her.
Okay.
So did anybody else watch the 60 Minutes and catch the Facebook whistleblower?
Well, this is the top story of the moment. So let me read it, and then we can jump into that. So here, the top story in my newsfeed is from CBS News. In a 60 Minutes interview, the Facebook Files whistleblower says the company is misleading the public on progress against hate speech, misinformation, and more. Frances Haugen says in her time with Facebook, she saw quote-unquote conflicts of interest between what was for the public, what was good for the public, and what was good for Facebook. Yes, and I imagine every McDonald's employee since 1950 could say the same. In fact, every fast food restaurant worker, every candy manufacturer, every soda manufacturer, most of the food in America, most of the drinks in America, I don't know, half of fucking Americans who work at companies who make things to be consumed by Americans could also say that their company was misleading the public and that there was conflicts of interest between what was good for the public and what was good for the company. Yeah, that's just kind of the name. And now I'm realizing why this isn't, there were no big barn burner revelations out of this 60 Minutes piece, because if that's your top quote in your headline, that a company does things that they don't put the public good above themselves as a company, this is going to be a very boring interview if that's the juicy quote that you put in the headline. Because that's pretty much every company.
Correct. That's why ESG is a big topic, because you start thinking about the world and humanity, in terms of your business and what you're doing to them. But I fully agree.
So I wonder, is this perhaps speaks to the younger folks, the next generation of folks who feel that companies should put the public interest above themselves as a company. That there's a changing of kind of values where we talked about it. It's called the meaningful economy. And I credit my buddy Bjorn Larson at the Foresight Group in Stockholm for coining this concept, although other people have very similar concepts. The concept that people want to live meaningful lives. They want to work at companies that they feel are benefiting society, and they want to have a meaningful life, and they now apply their own moral and ethics into where they decide to work, which we touched on this Friday because of a very similar announcement of a kind of former disgruntled kind of someone who also was claiming to be a whistleblower about things that were totally obvious. They're whistleblowing totally obvious things. My company puts themselves above the public good. That's your whistleblow? Well, shit, sister. The whole fucking world could blow that whistle. So you don't really have a profound statement there. But there was a very similar position taken by somebody at Jeff Bezos's kind of vanity project, the Blue Origin. And she made a similar kind of nothing burger whistleblow. And a bunch of people have left Blue Origin after they lost the lunar landing NASA contract, and we assume they may have gone over to Tesla. But the point that we raised all during that conversation was this idea of the meaningful economy and where people work, and they want to work somewhere that gives their life meaning. Because that is, oh my God, is that not the most privileged thing in the world? A lot of the developing world is thinking, what the fuck, y'all? You get to have the luxury of working choosing an occupation that doesn't collide with your values? Holy privilege, tsunami. And yet that seems to be, where a lot of folks are in the West these days. Is I'm not only did I realize the company I work for puts itself above the public interest, I feel compelled to save humanity by letting the world know this. It's a publicly traded company. Of course they're going to put their own financial interests above the public good. Is this not that's why they form a corporation, as a shield to prevent being sued publicly. Because they know they're going to do things that are not for the public. They're going to put the corporation above the public good. Anywho,
which article was that?
I'll tweet out the article now. This one's the CBS. Obviously a whole bunch of people wrote the articles here. There's the New York Times. The New York Times headline says, whistleblower says Facebook chooses profits over safety. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe because they're a public company with investors? CNN. We need to admit reality, Facebook whistleblower says. These are some really strong barn burner revelations here. Facebook whistleblower says company incentivizes angry, polarized, divisive content. I think we knew that, but yeah, maybe some people don't know that. They go with whatever's the most engaging, and whatever people tend to consume and be more engaged with angry, polarizing, divisive content. Yeah. Is that Facebook's fault that people do that? Is it McDonald's fault? So, by the way, the Instagram big headline that came out that Facebook now knows that young ladies said in a reply to their own survey that Instagram's causing them to have lower body image. Okay, does McDonald's do a survey and say, how does McDonald's make you feel about your body image? I'm pretty sure McDonald's knows 99.9999999% of Americans, McDonald's makes them feel bad about their body self-image. Far worse than Instagram does. Far, far worse. Where's the witch hunt on McDonald's? Or Coca-Cola? Weird. We're getting into some interesting territories here. And I think that the why we're getting into this is due to an overall shift of this. I think the meaningful economy concept on its face has a lot of incredibly inherently positive aspects, but everything is very nuanced. I think we're seeing just sort of the other side of that coin of the meaningful economy is people are going to become slightly activist against organizations that they feel are not the opposite of meaningful. People aren't going to. People aren't going to want to work at companies that they feel are hurting society. Yeah, Florian?
Yeah, I think, Tyler, I mean, technology is exponential, of course, we all know that. And the reach of people, and things can blow up in a very short period of time just with a tweet. You can have a huge shitstorm happening. Or also, the micro messaging since Cambridge Analytica, we're also aware of. Now, the question is, again, this is nothing new, what he said here, but the question is, what can we do about it? Yeah, because as now AI kicks in and let's say the algorithms kick in, and the algorithm, of course, of Facebook pushes to you whatever you get hooked on, and it's not even the person behind, it's just, of course, it magnifies. And now the question is, as this is mostly divisive or mostly has an effect on your psyche, because you only see great images or people which are really angry about something, and that's what you're hooked on, and that also polarizes yourself. The question is, what can we do? Actually, I will interview in about 2 weeks former CEO of Unilever, Paul Polman, who's been outspoken now, for example, to change the world, do something about it, and have companies actually not just only chasing profit, but actually doing more. And we know that Gen Z also has because of the connectivity and interest and worried about the world, the planet, and the people. That's actually a positive trend. But specifically, he has a book he's launching now called Net Positive, because you've heard a lot net zero right now. Politicians talking about net zero doesn't help the world. Net zero is not enough. It's really net positive. And that goes in the same direction of, so far we know that industry and business is just net horrible. It's not even net negative, it's net horrible. That's what we're chasing the bucks. Doesn't matter who is behind that, And that, of course, is changing. It's changing not only because we want to do it, but also because there is a genuine trend of people, actually consumers, being wary about it and wanting to make a difference, and otherwise they will not buy a product. So this is a positive trend.
So
This is where
I completely agree with that. But I would also say that there are levels to this. So I didn't see the full interview, but I saw excerpts of it, which could be dangerous in and of itself. What I gleaned from what I did see was that her concern, Frances's concern, was that she joined Facebook because there was some sort of integrity. I don't remember the name of the department, but a department that said, you know what, we're not going to do harm into the world. And so that's what allegedly attracted her to the company. And once the US in particular made it through the November 2020 election cycle, they completely dismantled that department and allowed some of the misinformation, lots of the misinformation and the incitement of violence to rank highly in terms of the algorithms that people saw. And I think that for her, that was the straw. So I completely agree, Florian. I remember 15 years ago, I'll just start calling him Professor Cal, because I find that I go back to conversations that we had back in the day. And with some of the work that we were doing, he said, Lakeisha, people are looking for meaning. And so, yes, I absolutely agree that, ESG and people are shopping more, they're choosing more, in terms of where to work based on the values of the corporation. And, in this particular case, given the power that social media has in terms of shaping societies and individuals' mindsets, and the psyche, the collective psyche, and seeing how that is played out in places like Myanmar and the US and many other places in terms of the incitement of violence, I think that's where she's coming from. So not so much like, companies need to do more for the world and for society, but you know what, we are actually doing harm and great harm as it relates to, how we interact and see each other as human beings.
The
to me
difficulty
is,
here
I think,
is that
profit. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, please, after you.
No, I was just going to say that Florian knows much, much more than I do. But nowadays, even before, I don't think profit and purpose are that different either. It's just that there is a lot of initiatives that are really having a very successful businesses by combining, profit for purpose. And that, they are even getting much more customers because of that. The very successful entrepreneur here in Ethiopia and has been even in the economic forum is doing shoe, for example, from recycled tires as a sole, or Tom's became like multi-million company because of the purpose that they have. Instead of not just doing a normal business, but at least even try to be mindful on not doing a harm. That's what I think Facebook is fighting, that they tend to be hypocrite. They say something and then they do something that actually harms society.
I think a big weakness of her case, and I did listen to the interview, is that her department was dissolved. And according to Facebook, it was redistributed among other departments. So that totally weakens her case a little bit because it's like not unexpected to say, well, that she has a personal gripe about this.
Is that? Do we know
as
that?
much as what?
Has that been
just quickly
confirmed?
on
She was in a department that was dissolved.
That is
Yes,
what
that
the
was.
CBS said.
Oh boy.
So just on the Florian point, basically, this ties up with all these Senate hearings, and if some sort of like a legal precedence is being set, because otherwise it's just going to be internal company thing that okay, we are profit for purpose, or like we're going to be focusing more sort of like on the customer well-being and all that. In order to actually bring it across the board, it has to have like some sort of like a legal precedence. And if the senators can come up with something like that, like which is some sort of legal mechanism that, okay, every single company has to actually follow that, I think that would be the way forward. But again, if there is some sort of like a legal precedence even defined, then how to substantiate that in the actual legal terms or the practicality of it, that will still be the challenge, that in those kind of scenarios, how can the company can come clean and say they have actually put the customer before anything else. So, but that would be one route of actually setting up some legal precedence for it.
So there's a couple. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting discussion. One of the things that was super interesting about the 60 Minutes interview was, the previous coverage had really highlighted this story about harm to teenage girls, which is one concern. But her interview really highlighted that she was actively recruited to address this problem of hate speech and of harmful political statements. And of course, we know that Facebook played this very problematic role in terms of the genocide in Myanmar, with the Myanmar military using Facebook to drive genocide against the Rohingya. There have been numerous other incidents like this. And so she was really recruited to try to address this. And then, as I think Shaheen pointed out, that team was then dismantled. So it's really not so much about the speech, I think, is about the algorithms and how, as we've talked about before, they exploit this, attraction to extreme and divisive content. So how could those algorithms be better regulated? Apparently, Facebook is not quite ready to take that on yet.
So I'm
I think they have
DMing
no
with
interest
one
in
of
doing
our
so.
regulars right now who's feeling a bit camera shy, but what this person says is that Facebook, along with the other addictive social platforms, changes what is meaningful for its users, often in non-helpful ways or in a non-helpful direction. And I couldn't agree more with that point of view. So it's not only in terms of what we see, but it changes what becomes important. And, people really dig in terms of, taking sides on issues that maybe they don't have a lot of real good data to go off of, but based on what shows up in their news feeds, they become these evangelists for one point or another, and it's harmful, it's destructive, and it's dangerous.
So there
were two things that were discontinued after the election. I apologize for who I just cut off.
No problem.
Not only was Civic, whatever the department was she was a part of, that was dissolved, but also, and I can't remember if there was a promise that was made or something, but after Facebook had apparently agreed to create some kind of safeguards that they turned on or they turned off, I can't remember, some kind of safeguards that said that they were going to monitor the disinformation campaigns on their platform. And I guess right after the election, they turned off those safeguards. That was the other thing that happened. So that was a secondary piece that they sort of talked about once, and they never really revisited as part of the interview.
So after that, when she kind of reached, she said at some point she realized she needed to start hoovering up all of the documents. So she copied thousands of documents, knowing she was going to, depart Facebook and then leak them to the press, which I assume is illegal. I guess it would depend.
No, actually, sorry, Tyler, it's not illegal because she was whistleblowing to the SEC. So that's actually protected under U.S. law.
Okay. And or it might violate her terms of employment, which she might have a legal protection to do. Right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
isn't whistleblowing to the government different than giving it to the press? I mean, I guess there's the Pentagon Papers case. I have to go back and think about what that was about. But but I mean, it's different going to the government than going to the press. I mean, I would think.
But maybe she did go to the government, and we may not know that yet. But then taking it to the Wall Street Journal, I wonder if the whistleblower is still I guess I don't know enough about the whistleblower law, but
But she's testifying this week, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
So she's doing
On
both.
the 5th, tomorrow, actually. I don't know what she might say that she didn't say to 60 Minutes, though. Interestingly, the headlines from like The Guardian says Facebook's putting profit before public good, says whistleblower. Internal documents show companies lying about making significant progress on hate. And then Wall Street Journal says the Facebook whistleblower, Frances Hagen, says she wants to fix the company, not harm it. The former Facebook employee says her goal is to help prompt change at the social media giant. And then 60 Minutes itself tweeted out, did a tweet thread, and the top tweet in the tweet thread, which is a video of the interview, says from 60 Minutes at 60 Minutes on their Twitter account, says, it's a quote from her in the video. Facebook has realized that if they change the algorithm to be safer, people will spend less time on the site. They'll click on less ads. They'll make less money. So this is the big summary of it, essentially. I imagine McDonald's also knows if they stop selling hamburgers and start selling salads, people will spend less money and they'll make less money. And I imagine Coke knows that if they stop putting so much sugar in their drinks and start offering green smoothies, that they too might lose money. So,
but Tyler,
yes,
public health is different
than
putting the stability of peace or democracy of a country at risk. I mean, at the end, public health takes longer, and of course, it has a devastating effect. And you look at the data, especially in the U.S., on that where longevity is actually declining for specific areas, for specific ethnic groups in the U.S. Without saying names, but that's one part. But the other part, of course, is if you interfere in mass manipulation and micro-messaging on a big scale through technology, and you know that you don't care, you want to make sure that your business is competitive because others might take over, that this probably has a different scale of what that actually means. The statement of putting profit before the greater good of your of your home country, of your stability. I think this is it's not the proportion, not the same one. To compare McDonald's to a tech company.
But
But as
Tyler,
long
I
as
think using just real quick. So using your example of Coca-Cola, if Coca-Cola went back to putting cocaine or Coca-Cola in their soft drink, that's different from sugar. And I think that's the line. And that's what we really need to focus on, because it's not about how much good or how not bad, but if something is just inherently dangerous, and there are no safeguards.
There's a lot of
sugar is
I was
way
about to
more
say.
addicting than cocaine.
I was
7
just about to
times more,
say.
and it lights up
Okay,
the same areas in the brain that
point
and
taken,
more
point taken.
addicting
But
than cocaine.
nonetheless, I mean, hypothetically speaking, if it's not, I mean, yes, sugar is not great, but I would argue that cocaine is worse. I mean, we don't have to
Sugar is
go down
worse
that
than
line.
cocaine. It's worse
Well,
than
there have been
cocaine.
numerous attempts to try to regulate the, big food industry, and it's actually really challenging because their lobbyists are so powerful.
Yes,
So I'm
that's the
sure that
only
Facebook is
reason
doing the
it's
same
allowed.
thing.
Sugar is toxic and poison, cancerous, and worse than cocaine.
Yeah, okay, I'll accept that. I guess that's not my main point. My main point is if there was something that was super, super, super dangerous. And for me, I think that cocaine is super dangerous. Sugar is dangerous, but just just go with this analogy with me
Yeah.
for a moment. You know, there are levels, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and I think that that's the argument,
Uh-huh.
is that yes, companies can put their self-interest above that of the public good, generally speaking. But if there's something that is just so toxic and so dangerous, at what point might a government need to step in and, you know, either regulate it or, you know, put some sort of
Sure.
safeguards in place?
So we still have alcohol and cigarettes are publicly sold. They've been regulated. And I guess we're more or less, as a society, comfortable with where alcohol and cigarettes have been. I mean, they really have not been in the news in any meaningful way for many years. So is it possible that Facebook will eventually also, and social media, not to pick on Facebook, but any kind of algorithms will eventually be intermingled in society in the same way that alcohol and cigarettes are today? And by the way, we have one of the more interesting regulations around them is that you can't do them under certain circumstances, like at work. You can't do them. Usually, there's quite a high age limit because it requires a bit of judgment before you're able to participate in those activities. There's quite a bit of taxes on top of those activities, etc.
And there's one other thing, by the way, that is relatively recent in the last, I don't know, 20 years or something, 30. You know, they're not allowed to advertise like they used to, so you don't see billboards with the Marlboro Man
Right.
anymore. So
That's a
they
great
did a
point. Yeah. Okay.
But I think, like Florian said, there is a huge difference between, you know, healthcare, which takes a lot of time, and also, at least, you know, that there is a personal responsibility. Some parts of the politicians and others think that you would be able to kind of, you know, speak with your wallet, like is adding salads or other things. But like Lakeisha said as well, when you are harming a society in general, and especially being such a global, you know, social platform, and a lot of politicians are also after you because of the harm that it can bring into democracy and social life and in general society, that's a bit different from, you know, alcohol, which is, you know, case by case, and types of healthcare that's individual, I think.
You know, one of the questions that I was thinking is, who decides on the standard of the things that Facebook should control? For example, if you know, certain materials like cigarette or alcohol or etc., there are governmental legal standards. You just cannot do this. You cannot show drinking on television. Blah blah blah. Like the fact the drink going into your mouth or something. So these are standards that are set up by the government. With respect to what Facebook has done, particularly on the things that they could have done to prevent the January 6th riot, I was wondering, are there any governmental standards, legal standards that they should have followed but did not? Or it's Facebook itself that should have set up those standards and then followed them through? It just seems to me that it's the latter. That Facebook somehow had a civil integrity team that was monitoring election, you know, misinformation, et cetera, whatever that detail. I'm not privy to the details of the standards that Facebook team would check, either keywords or any sort of suspicious persons, Facebook posting, et cetera, whatever. They seem to have a certain things that they follow, and then they would shut it down. But after the election was over, presumably Facebook decided, oh, you know, that was a temporary measure for the election period of time. So therefore, they called off the civil integrity team. Again, so the bigger picture is, it's almost like we are giving Facebook itself the power to regulate itself. And I think I mentioned this about a month ago, about the fact that even though Facebook is not the government, you know, I was relating to freedom of speech. Even though it was not a government, as in, you know, 100 years ago, a government had the most power of regulating speech, as in not letting you publish something, not letting you stand in a soapbox in Hyde Park to make speeches. They had the power. But nowadays, the table has turned because of the power of big tech, as in the Facebooks, I'm talking about these companies, whatever it is, Facebook, Twitter, they can actually shut down the president's speech, former President Trump, right? So they're so powerful if you compare to the last 100, 200 years in terms of its power to, I would say, disseminate speech or allowing speech, whatever the terms you want to use.
I think the
So I think
best.
that's the question that Congress needs to decide, hopefully tomorrow. I think Chuck Schumer or someone mentioned that, can we rely on Facebook to regulate itself? So that's probably what Congress needs to ask this question during the hearing.
Well,
You know,
in the United States, the history to look at, quite frankly, is when we only had television, and we only had radio, and we only had the three big channels: CBS, NBC, and ABC. There was no Fox. The Federal Communications Commission actually regulated what the radio companies and the TV companies could put out there. Okay, there was only so many of them, and they regulated them. They actually had something called they had something called a fairness doctrine, actually, to make sure that there was not misinformation out there. And the fairness doctrine, the FCC got rid of, I believe, in 1997, because of the plethora of new cable channels and also the internet and everything. They just decided this now. The media is no longer controlled by a handful of entities. Therefore, everyone's got a fair chance, and therefore they wanted to get at the government out of the business of regulating it. I mean, you'd have to basically repeal 230, regulate Facebook and some of the other big media companies like a common carrier type of thing, like it was. I mean, like it was CBS. CBS, NBC, and ABC, and even Fox on their terrestrial broadcasting, not Fox News, is still regulated by the FCC. There's certain things they cannot do on those networks that cable can do. Okay. And so the question is, do they want to go address that and say, maybe we're going to bring everybody into some sort of, older FCC standard? So, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying it's a good idea or not, but
yeah, Ken,
Yeah,
I think
just to
that's a
build.
really interesting question. And I think the challenge is that Facebook is not, producing the content. And so their claim is that they're immune under something called Section 230, which, they're claiming to be a
right.
neutral public platform.
But
But
it could
then, of course,
repeal
they're not,
230.
the algorithms are not neutral, right? And so I guess the question is, what's their responsibility? And one argument is that under the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, corporations have a responsibility to do due diligence and to identify whether their products could cause harm. And it looks like Facebook did do the due diligence, but then didn't take the necessary steps to mitigate the potential harm.
Yeah, just to quickly build upon Ken's and Meg's point, I'll just land quickly. Nowadays, look at this. Look at this room. It's not CBS, NBC anymore. I mean, everybody is a news publisher, basically. I mean, look at Clubhouse and this particular room. The kind of news that we were getting, we were spreading information. So it's not just few oligarchies, if you will, that the government control using FCC to manage
And
to regulate
that's why
speech.
they changed the rules,
The
Ben. That's why they got
Yeah,
rid of the rule. So, I
But
mean,
yeah. And,
quick correction.
just to
Uh,
build upon the Max point, I think the neutrality thing, Facebook and Twitter, whatever, supposedly they are a platform, as in neutral. They don't provide the content, which is it's kind of like ISP, right? But the interesting is that that's not quite the case. Like Mac pointed out, they do have algorithm, but their algorithm was produced for their business profits, right? Like how to get more clicks, more hits, etc., etc. So I'm sure. I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming their algorithm's goal was not to favor certain speech or disfavor certain speech. For them, hey, if I get more traffic, more advertising dollars, that's good for me. So the interesting part is that where is the line?
Okay.
Where does it trigger
Yeah.
the third rail
Eli,
in terms of the algorithm?
you wanted to
yeah.
clarify?
So it was the Reagan administration in 1987 that got rid of the fairness doctrine.
Okay.
well,
So
it
That's
was
right.
the FCC. I mean, the Reagan was not an executive action. I don't believe
But
it.
the Reagan administration was very pleased with that.
Well, they may, yeah, their commissioners may have voted for it, but the FCC is almost bipartisan. Generally, I mean, I have to go look at the vote whether there was a
Not
one
really.
vote. It is half
So
Democrats.
I think the chairman has a lot of power.
yeah, so I want to point something out though, that was a point that was made just now between Meg, I think, and Ben, regarding what we were just talking about, I think it's really interesting that a lot of these platforms have hidden behind, or that they've said that they're a platform, they're not the publisher. The problem maybe it's interesting how the documents that this whistleblower has taken out of Facebook seem to imply that they were aware of the content that they were favoring. And I don't know why my brain just kind of keeps going. If Facebook was aware of the type of content that allows them to make money, yes, that's absolutely their prerogative to do, because they have, to Tyler's point, they have shareholders, and it's their they have to make money for their shareholders, otherwise that's what they're there for. But it also goes against the idea that they can continue to hide behind the idea that they're simply a platform, because if they are promoting certain types of content, I would think that the argument can then be made that if they're promoting certain types of content, that also, I don't know if it makes them a publisher, but it definitely makes them something more than just an a neutral platform.
Okay,
so our just real quick, so our hidden techie friend just wrote something that was so powerful to me. He said, you join a platform, you aren't the ideal user though, so the platform gently, automatically directs your interactions, drives increased engagement with monetizable content, makes you even defensive about the platform, so that you'll defend it and its features from detractors. It makes you care about things that have no meaning in real life, all to drive you to become the perfect user. There is a word for that process, which is grooming. And when I read grooming, it's like that's what predators do, right? They find people that are susceptible, and they lure them in. And so this argument is that's exactly what Facebook is doing.
Okay, so I want to read a bit from Bloomberg's on this, where it says she started working at Facebook in June 2019 after stints at Google, Yelp, and Pinterest, according to her LinkedIn page. The Iowa native was recruited to Facebook to be the lead product manager. So she wasn't just on this team that got dissolved, she was the lead of it, right? So she's the lead product manager of the civic misinformation team, which got dissolved, which might be why she's a little, disgruntled that her initiative within Facebook wasn't, valued, as and when people feel that they were not valued, that can be a problem. Anyway, it says she was later worked on the counter espionage team after that got dissolved, according to her website. So Frances told 60 Minutes she agreed to take the Facebook job so she could work against misinformation after seeing her friend get wrapped up in online conspiracy theories. So she already knew there was a big problem there, and she thought, I'm going to go there and fix it. Right? That's what her own admission. So she already knew there was a problem there with misinformation, is sort of the point, before she even took the job. And that's why she took the job. She thought she could go in there and fix Facebook. And I'll prove that in a second. She even says so in a minute. Here's a quote. I never wanted anyone to feel the pain that I felt, she told the network. I had seen how high the stakes were in terms of making sure there was high quality information on Facebook. This is quite an ambitious Mount Everest of a climb here, going to join 100,000 person company with the interesting Napoleonish level of ambition to fix Facebook. During her time at Facebook, Frances grew more alarmed by the choices the company was making to prioritize its own growth at the expense of the public. Introduced in the trove of documents that Hagen shared was a series of internal research slides outlining the impact of Facebook photo sharing app, Messenger of Teens, and etc. Her lawyers also filed at least 8 complaints with the SEC, and it's clear Hagan left Facebook knowing full well she planned to hand over damning company documents. After resigning from her job in April, she stayed at Facebook an additional month, collecting material on the company she felt proved Facebook had failed to be responsible. So she had tried to do the right thing. Facebook didn't do the right thing, and now she's going to prove that Facebook did the wrong thing. She felt like Facebook made a decision which diminished her efforts, and she's going to prove you did wrong. You did me wrong. You're wrong. I'm right. We're going to fix this. She expected the company to notice her activity, which included viewing documents unrelated to her job. She added, Facebook can see when employees view certain documents or make specific searches on the company's internal communication project called Workplace. Hagan even left a cryptic message for the company on her last day. The Journal reported, by using the internal search function to type the words, "I don't hate Facebook, I love Facebook, I want to save it." Hagan grew up attending she grew up in Iowa, and she has a strong sense of pride in democracy and responsibility for civic participation, according to her website. Now she sees herself as an advocate for public oversight on social media. We can have, in her quote, those are her words, and she's an advocate for public oversight on social media. We can have social media we enjoy that brings out the best in humanity, she says on her website. Okay. And I think even Clubhouse founders might agree with you there, that we can have social media we enjoy that brings out the best in humanity. I think that's part of what the initial premise behind Clubhouse, in fact. And I think anyone people who believe that, and there are people who believe that, who go out to create social platforms precisely to do that. And that's generally how the marketplace works. Rather than forcing one company to change to be the company you want it to be, that traditionally you go out and you create a competitive alternative for the marketplace that you think should be in the marketplace. So rather than forcing McDonald's to stop selling burgers and start selling salads, you open a salad bar, for example. Now, back to the comparison to cigarettes and alcohol. One of the things we did with cigarettes was we start putting very clear labeling on it that says this product causes cancer, is known to cause cancer. In every advertisement, in every package, it's very obvious. This is bad for you. This is bad for you. Would that be, and what would be apt if Facebook's continues to operate as normal? I don't know that it's illegal for it to do what it's doing, first of all. And how to rectify the situation. Apparently, perhaps Facebook has a total legal right to operate as it's operating. And so you can't really stop that. But the regulation would be every time you come to Facebook, there's a roadblock that says, this product is known to have these negative consequences, just like every drug has, for example. Potential side effects may include.
I think a lot of governments are already taking action, right? I mean, the Australian that you were reading yourself was saying that, okay, for every click they get for those, certified journalists that they have to pay, they can make their life a living, well, whatever, hard. That even India, right, asking Facebook to have a personal representative where they can call a person, so they can have a hard time. They have been shut down here in Ethiopia a few times too. So they can't. I think, to me, is McDonald's has a product people buy and eat and consume. Facebook has a product that's people who are really complex and have a society as actually its own biggest product. And that's, I think, what makes it completely different, and not, and I think it's a bit not equal comparison between a burger product and a human being as a product.
Hey, Tyler, I want
I
to make a
just
point of information here just to correct something that's been said, because I went and looked it up because I was pretty sure I was right. The Federal Communications Commission voted 4-0 to get rid of the that rule. So 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. There was a vacancy. Reagan appointed 3 of the 4 members. One of them was appointed by Nixon, but he has to appoint. There has to be 2 Democrats on that commission. And by the way, they're also subject to Senate confirmation, and the Senate was controlled by the Democrats at the time. So this idea that this was some sort of partisan, this was generally where public policy was going, and it was done on a bipartisan basis, and that's just the absolute facts of what happened there. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what the point that Tina mentioned regarding, is Facebook merely a neutral platform, or there's really content preference that's generated by this algorithm that Facebook is using? I think the distinction between malfeasance and nonfeasance. In general, the law looks more leniently at nonfeasance, but not so kindly on malfeasance. In other words, if you're doing something actively and you cause a harm, that's usually not a good idea in terms of in the eyes of the law, at least tort law. So with that in mind, the question is Facebook really a platform as in telephone lines? You can do a lot of bad things in telephone lines, right? But telephone companies are not going to be held responsible for that. I think the quick answer would be no, because they actually have algorithm of preferring or pushing or highlighting certain type of things, postings on Facebook, right? So I think for Facebook, one of the arguments would be this: is the algorithm set up to favor these bad speeches, misinformation, harmful speeches? Or is the algorithm set up to merely attract more traffic to the website, to have more clicks? In other words, it could be favoring certain speeches where people are saying blue hair is better than green hair. You're dumb if you want green hair. And the green hair people go, you're dumb if you're blue hair. And there's a lot more posting and fighting, blah, blah, blah. And that type of exchanges, postings, would be favored by the algorithm. So if that were the case, then the question would be, what are the standards in those type of algorithm selections that you carve out the bad ones? For example, someone would say, oh, Nazis are wonderful. They're great people. Well, those could be keywords that could be deleted by the algorithm, automatically, even though it could cause lots of traffic, lots of hits clicking on the posts. So with that kind of analogy, I think Facebook needs to show that its algorithm, again, if this were a legal case, if you will, its algorithm was really set up for legitimate business purposes, not for favoring, regulating certain type of speeches over the other. In other words, the bad speeches that came out, they were really the bathwater. The baby is still good. Okay, of course, that depends on exactly what the algorithm was produced. So the question going back to Congress would be, Congress, I mean, the ball is it's in their court. Almost like Hagen was saying. By the way, I read a bit of a description of the Hagen's interview. She's even empathetic or sympathetic to Mark Zuckerberg. As Tyler mentioned, I think her goal was not to kill Facebook, but rather to make it better, to get rid of the bad things there. So I think the bad things to get rid of, Congress really needs to get into the picture to make sure that there are bright lines or clear guidelines that companies like Facebook need to follow. As in, if this is type of exceptions, you need to get rid of from your algorithm, even though it causes so much traffic to your website. I'm sorry, as a society, we don't want that. But so it's not really great. I think it's not a great idea to let Facebook make that determination. I think really Congress needs to step in, and hopefully it'll come out during the hearing tomorrow.
Hi,
But
this is
the Congress has no clue how to regulate it, and the balance between free speech and harmful speech is a very difficult balance. And as long as profits are driven by engagement and engagement is driven by conflict, algorithms are going to optimize for that unless Congress comes in with a different optimization and say that all companies must optimize for this particular objective ethically, socially, etc., as priority number one. And once that objective has been optimized, go forth and optimize for profit as you can. And if your algorithms are unable to optimize as such, well, guess what? You're going to go out of business. There's no way anything like this is going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I actually agree with your premise here, Shin. However, there's a there is a little bit of recent precedents to draw from, which is the COVID-19 misinformation, where they're going to penalize platforms if they have too much of this COVID-19 misinformation and might hold them personally responsible. They could do the same for other types of misinformation. And I'm trying to think what would be other areas. But to back to your point, and I'll make your argument for you, do we want the government becoming the politifactometer, the truth determiner of misinformation or not? That's not a traditional role of the government.
Well, but
I
do
Well,
you
think you're
if
think
it's
absolutely
not the
right.
also
There,
government,
should
there
give
is
it's
that
there is
Facebook.
some
responsibility
there
to
there is
Facebook?
some low hanging fruit. There are things
Yeah,
that are
that's
very
what I want to
clearly
try to get
wrong.
into, is from a really sober, neutral position. Because I
I think
believe
you're absolutely right.
essentially what if we really want to put a pin, I believe in what the harm of these algorithms are, that these rabbit hole, they show you content based on the content you've seen, and they can push people to become more extreme, both left and right. And there was actually a new Atlantic piece that just came out that said exactly this, that you have more extremism, authoritarian tendencies almost equally on both the left and the right, that tries to control speech, tries to be very controlling. You have very far left and very far right who essentially are doing nearly identical things in terms of how they're a bit extreme in their political views, and what's the word I'm looking for?
Demonize.
Demonizing the other side, and they're not very flexible in their views, and etc. So my point is, I believe that's a result of these platforms to some degree, and the kind of bubble, silo thought bubbles that people get put into. But what if we were to take the very middle of the road approach, be like, okay, what really do we do? What are some actual sane kind of regulations, for lack of a better word, that we could apply, that and that whole idea of like, hey, this platform is known to cause extremism. How could we stop that extremism? Is that something we even really want to get into? It's a very tricky, and certainly not historically, governments are not good at navigating this tightrope.
But in
What
So
if
if
they
agreement
I
just
with
can
you,
stopped
the
elaborate,
way
rewarding
to go forward,
with your conversation.
what what if they just stopped rewarding engagement, and then it really was a neutral
to do
platform? I
this
mean, when I
is
first
to
joined Facebook, I remember you would just see whatever had been most recently
Right,
posted among your
algorithmic. Yeah,
friends,
I mean,
right?
chronological. Yes.
That's
So
exactly
what?
what I
Why
was going
not
to go
just
with
have
as
that? I mean,
well.
that would already be an improvement, I think.
Yeah, you're right. They could force that back on Twitter and all the social media apps and be like, all right, everybody, we're going back to chronological.
I think that's where I was also going to go, and I agree, Tyler. You know, look at all the division that these algorithms, as you're saying, absolutely. Look at what happened during the elections in America. How people were just going at it with each other. Pro-Trump, against Trump. What's going on with the vaccines, anti-vaccines? What's going on with Black Lives Movements? Are you Jewish? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Christian? I mean, I don't remember growing up having any of these background. I had friends that I agreed with, and I had friends that I didn't agree with, and none of these major conversations that divided so many of us. I mean, I think pretty much I can assume that there's a lot of people here in this room that can feel this and say, you've probably lost a lot of friends or disconnected yourself from people that you thought you knew, and then later on you realize, oh, you're not, in the same mindset, or maybe that's who they were all along. Maybe they were become a bit more extreme in their views and the way they saw the world and their their views on everything. And I think that if you look at it from a broader scope, I mean, we started as, is this a bad influence for young girls, and is this about bad imaging? But I think in a greater, bigger scope, it's really going into that we're all being divided from each other and turning into to what level of extremism is to be seen. But we're all getting more extreme in our views, and we're all taking a stronger stand now today than we did in the past on certain things that probably would have we would have just washed over and never even thought about, or never even came into a conflict with each other. So I think this is what's going on, and eventually, I mean, this could turn into the point where you're actually going to have major fissures within a government, within a society, where people are going to be so extreme in their views that you're also going to have problems with governing them. So I think this is going to be, this is a bigger thing. I'm, there's a lot of stuff that came up that probably wouldn't have come up had all these people not connected and all these, algorithms. I mean, you would see the same conversations from the same people coming up, and you had maybe a few thousand friends. And then, you would see that first top 100 or 200 people or whatever and have that conversation. And because of that, that conversation gets more bold, gets more, sucked into your brain, or just, so it means to see that on the bigger note, this is what's going on, that there's a division happening between friends, between family members, between societies, between co-workers, between, governments. So it's a much bigger, it's going to turn into a much bigger monster than it is right now, I think.
So I have one thing to say about what Tyler just mentioned, and Nita, you just hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. And I hope I didn't butcher your name.
It's Netta.
I think
it's okay.
Netta. Thank you. But I think we should have choice. You either want the algorithm that the company is offering, or you have the choice to go to a chronological timeline. I've been.
They do give you the choice.
Well, they don't.
They do.
I don't think so.
They do.
I can't
Well, the
find it.
choice would be a paid service that does not.
I'll show you exactly where it is. So, for example, I have Twitter open right now. In the upper right corner, there's a little star, and I click on the star, and it says
Twitter does.
Switch to latest tweets. Latest tweets show up as they happen, and so it's in fact it's the only icon on the whole screen that I'm looking at.
Right, but does Facebook also allow that?
They do.
They do, but it's the default is the algorithm, and each time you log on, you have to switch it back.
Yeah, so
you have to switch back. Yes.
Yeah, I would say that shouldn't be the default. They should allow you to make that choice be whatever your choice is, be your default at all times.
Just remember that they've pushed us into this because of the way, and I'm talking about Americans for the most part, because of how they market. They want us to make quick decisions based off of emotion with very little information, and that's how they get us to make the sale fast. That's all they're concerned with. And unfortunately, that just spills over into every aspect of how life works, right? Because we're forced into this binary option and everything, because we've been pushed emotionally this way. All of our thinking happens, and it takes true connection with the power of voice, with the power of tone and intonation and cadence, to connect people in a different way. And we're doing it here. You hear us get heated. And the other day when we're talking about recordings, right, that got heated. And, there's a point where, you get so frustrated and you're like, I can't believe you're saying this. I agree with you on so many points, but right now I totally disagree with you. That's friendship. And when you're online, it's not designed to breed friendship. It's designed to create a quick decision and a reaction so that you can basically polarize the other person who's not actually a person you're fighting against. It's the other view or the other thing to be consumed. And I'll get off my soapbox now, but I think things like this can reunite us.
Let's get into the second story of the day. Now that we're just over an hour on the Facebook issue, which will continue tomorrow because that whistleblower is going to do a Senate hearing. And the second biggest story is from the Wall Street Journal. It says they've done analysis that Apple's operating profits from games in 2019 totaled $8.5 billion, $2 billion more than the combined profits of Sony, Activision, Nintendo, and Microsoft. Okay. So just from games, they make more than Sony, Activision, Nintendo, and Microsoft. Yeah, Apple's a big company, $2 trillion company. What kind of napkin analysis are you doing over here with your crack team over here at the Wall Street Journal? That's something any of us could have figured out in 5 minutes. So Apple doesn't make video games, but it's the hottest player in gaming. CEO, right. And Uber doesn't own any cars, and Airbnb doesn't own any properties, yet they are the biggest. Wall Street Journal, are you just figuring out tech? Did you just learn what a platform is? Apple doesn't make video games, CEO Tim Cook quietly turned the iPhone company into a superpower in the video game business. Now he's fighting rivals in multiplayer universe. I'm afraid if I read this, I'm going to start ranting again at the tech folks, journalists who don't understand how tech works. So maybe best we just leave this one alone and save myself a huge ranting. The next one is that Gurman, who's the Apple geek at Wall Street Journal, says that the M1X powered MacBook Pros with 8 high-performing cores, 2 high-efficiency cores, 16 or 32 graphic cores will launch in the next month. And we knew, actually, that they were going to launch sometime here in October. They're going to launch the 14-inch and the 16-inch MacBook Pros. And essentially, the headline here is that he's confirming that it's going to be an M1X powered. Well, we already knew that as well, but we didn't know the details of the M1X chip, that it has 8 high-performance cores, 2 high-efficiency cores, and 16 or 32 graphics cores. So for the hardcore Apple geeks, there's your update. And then there's, in addition to Mark Gurman, Ben Kuo is also one of the big Apple leakers, and that happens to be the next big story. According to Kuo, Apple has canceled plans to release an iPad Air with an OLED display in 2022. Big whoop. Okay, next. Bloomberg, a shortage of silicon metal sparked by China's cutting output has sent prices up 300% in less than 2 months, impacting production of chips, glass, and more. Silicon metal disrupted amid electricity curbs in China. Chemicals firms declare force majeure on silicon products. This could get very interesting. This goes the snowball of supply chain issues here. China's power problems is now leading to other big problems here. So, for example, it says a metal made from the second most abundant element on Earth has become scarce, threatening everything from car parts to computer chips and throwing up another hurdle for the world economy. The shortage is silicon metal, sparked by a production cut in China, has sent prices up 300% in 2 months. It's the latest in a litany of disruptions, from snarled supply chains to a power crunch, that are creating a destructive mix for companies and consumers. The worsening situation has forced some companies to declare force majeure. On Friday, Norwegian chemical manufacturer Elkem said it and several other companies making silicon-based products suspended some sales due to the shortage. The silicon issue also captures how the global energy crisis cascading through economies in multiple ways. The slashing of output in China, far and away the world's biggest silicon producer, is the result of efforts to reduce power consumption. For many industries, it's impossible to avoid the fallout. Silicon, which makes up 28% of the Earth's crust by weight, is one of mankind's most diverse building blocks. It's used in everything from computer chips to concrete to glass and car parts. It can be purified into ultra-conductive material, and it's the raw material for silicon, a water and heat-resistant compound used widely. Despite its natural abundance in crude forms, such as in sand and clay, there have been warnings in recent years that surging industrial demand risks creating improbable shortages for raw materials like gravel. Now, with China curbing production of high-purity silicon metal, the unlikely fragility of the silicon supply chain is being exposed to an alarming degree. The knock-on consequences are also particularly alarming for automakers, where silicon is alloyed with aluminum to make engine blocks and other parts. Along with silicon, they are facing a surge in magnesium, another alloying ingredient that forced production issues during China's power crunch. If you have silicon supply constraints, then you've got a problem, says the head of trading at aluminum alloy maker Romco Metals. There is still some supply out there, but it's trading at a clearing price that's obviously very high. Silicon metal is made by heating whatever. So this could create a snowball where the car companies were dealing with chip issues, and now they're dealing with other issues that are going to stop car production. And this could have interesting global effects that are hard to yet fully predict. Chris?
Carburetors are coming back, guys. They're going to come up with uber efficient carburetors that have low emissions, computer designed and stuff like that, and it'll solve some of those basic problems because the issue is now a car is a rolling computer. Even a combustion engine's a rolling computer. You have timing, you have all of it's a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional map of all these different parameters, and it's no longer mechanically linked anymore. Everything's just computer. So there's like 50 computers on a car now, and if each computer's missing components just to get the motor to run, we're going to be SOL. But guess what? Back in the 60s, we did things without computers.
Right. So Tesla, there's 2 tweets that people sent in recently. Started with Evan, who tweeted this one out from the car blog Jalopnik. And the headline says, I asked experts why car makers can't just transition to newer chips or other chips or reduced chips and etc. And if you ask an executive at a chip manufacturer who's to blame for what automakers are going through, like Intel CEO, the answer might not be especially sympathetic one. And he says, I'll make them as many Intel chips as they want, says Intel. It just makes no economic or strategic sense, he says, who came to the auto show to convince car makers they need to let go of the distant past. Rather than spending billions on new old fabs, let's spend millions to help migrate designs to modern ones. Okay, and then automobiles have a long operating life compared to many other consumer devices. People expect their cars to last for more than 10 years, whereas many 5-year-old consumer products are often considered nearly obsolete. Thus, parts for automobiles, including some chips, are often built on older, proven technology rather than the latest available technology. The semiconductor companies continue to operate older fabs using bigger 90 nanometer processes, but they don't invest in new plants making these parts because the cost of manufacturing the chips are less for newer fabs than with finer lithographic features. Anyway, so similarly,
someone just needs to come up with an SoC for combustion vehicles too. Basically, harmonize everything onto one master CPU instead of having.
So
50.
somebody replied to Evan with this interesting headline. That Tesla rewrote its own software to survive the chip shortage. Tesla is weathering the global chip shortage by rewriting its vehicle software to support alternative chips. Elon Musk said on an earnings call, we are able to substitute alternative chips and then write a firmware in a matter of weeks. It's not just a matter of swapping out a chip. You also have to rewrite the software. Okay. But now we're getting into more than just the chips. We're getting into the real parts of the engine blocks and things like that. So it's going to get crazy.
Well, the other thing that I would say is that scarcity brings about efficiency. And so this might just be another example of how an industry is forced to change. And I think, Chris, that's a lot of what you were saying as well. If a side effect is that cars are more energy efficient, more, if another side effect might be that people are sharing vehicles more instead of having 3 cars for 2 people in the US, in certain parts of the country. There might be some positive unintended consequences or benefits that come from the shortage, depending on how long it lasts.
Okay, so kind of on this topic, and according to some analysis, global VC investing funding for semiconductor startups has reached $3.7 billion this year so far in the first 9 months, which is last year total for the whole year was 3.4. So we're likely to see another 25%, which puts us at about 4.5 versus 3.4 from last year. So about 25% boost in semiconductor investing. The next one's quite interesting. And back to our first headline of the day. Apple.
Quick comment.
Yes.
Tyler, all that investment is for AI, not for chip shortage, by the way.
Okay. So it says Apple and Google could help with child safety online by determining a user's age at the device setup and sharing it with apps implementing child safety features. and here we go with the identity verification that I've been ranting about for almost every day for months now. And I'm surprised that didn't come up in our hour-long rant about Facebook and how to fix Facebook. Would not identity verification procedures, which include age and geography, so every actor in the entire platform is known and verified, might that not stop a whole lot of negative behaviors of all kinds? And this article seems to imply this as well, certainly when as it relates to kids, because kids are still being exposed to content they shouldn't be exposed to. This is a solvable problem technologically. The question is, do we want to solve, is there ethical, moral issues with enforcing identity verification on these platforms?
I missed a ton, so I would have brought it up. My 3-year-old was up until midnight. But yeah, I would have brought it up because that accountability just breeds much different behavior, right? Like we're accountable on this platform to each other, and that's why we tend to speak a little bit more considerately. Our actions are a little bit more aligned with our personal behavior out in public or maybe with our friends because you are our friends. And I don't like being inconsistent. And I think when you're online, you have this kind of ability to hide if you come up with a fake persona. So I think that is the key to a better world. I think is just people being able to be held accountable for their actions online. All the troll accounts and stuff. They never have pictures. Like, I personally know so many of them, and I know them in real life, but they have a fake Facebook account or a picture that doesn't reflect them or anything. And they go out there and they say stuff, and they claim that, oh, this is my Facebook because you know who I am, but then it's the onus is on me to go rat them out or whatever. And unfortunately, it's just not my style. And
So,
so
but here,
identity is key.
Yes, but here's the debate, I think, in essence, which is clearly if we had identity verification, you'd have a lot less bad content, but you might lose an incredibly valuable shield for people who feel the need, this once in a year or so, somebody has something important to say that they can't say with their own identity. So, because people fear some kind of retribution for saying some particular thing if everyone is identified. However, that in turn could be combated by very strong free speech laws. So in countries where you don't have incredibly strong free speech laws that protect people, people get very afraid of saying things. For example, no one in China is going to say anything. People in Thailand don't speak negatively about the king. You see what I'm saying? So this kind of, if we do identity verification, that works great in countries where people have very strong free speech, like they have in Scandinavia. However, in even countries that you don't think of as authoritarian, they might be afraid to say lots of things now. In parts of the Middle East, it's if you're homosexual, that can be
Well,
incredibly problematic.
I mean, sorry to take up so much time, but I'll be honest. Like, I don't really speak my mind on Facebook. you know, I
Great
learned that a
point.
long time ago. You can't really speak your mind on that platform. So that's the problem, is because I am identifiable and accountable for my words, right? Like you hear all these stories where people do or say something on Facebook and they lose their job. Well, people stop saying stuff, but those that can hide behind the shadow accounts can say whatever they want without accountability, and there's no recourse for their actions either. So it just feeds into that that anger aggression loop that Facebook's trying to capitalize on. So this identification is their biggest nightmare. I'm sorry, Michelle, if you're in the room.
Well, yes and no. They would.
Like, this is
Yes and no,
it's
because
their biggest nightmare because
I
there's
don't think
so
it
much
is.
fraudulent ad activity.
I
There's
don't.
so much fraudulent ad activity,
Well,
right?
maybe.
There's bots that drive sale. Like, you have a Facebook. Early in the Facebook days, if you were trying to promote a brand, you'd spend hundreds of dollars, and you'd be like, "What the hell are these clicks? Right? Where
Right.
are these clicks going?"
Oh, right.
It's bots, right? And they were
Right.
getting paid. You were paying Facebook for bullshit, and Facebook was taking the bullshit and saying, "Hey, how do we make more bullshit?" I'll stop.
Right. So they had millions of fake accounts that were clicking on your ads and whatnot. So But
And that's recent, by the way. HBO just did a documentary, not just on Facebook. HBO did a documentary on influencers and how easy it was to get bots and phony accounts on all the social media
great
platforms.
point. For those who don't know, a whole lot of influencers were dabbling in that whole game of buying followers and all of that to, become a fake influencer. They're influencing a bunch of bot accounts that I know a lot of people who have 35,000 Instagram followers because they paid for them. And yeah, that's a whole shady industry in and of itself. And it would solve that. That's a great point. But identity verification could make each legitimate user more valuable, for example.
And by the way, there's ways of doing it.
Definitely.
I'll give you an example of how you could do identity verification, because they use it in online casinos now. Now we have online sports betting in the
Uh-huh.
United States. Okay, so like in New Jersey, they could verify probably through credit cards and other things that they use, but they verify your age online. They verify who you are online. They don't make you go to a casino and show up and say, let's you don't give your fingerprints. They do the whole thing online, and they haven't had a problem. They've been able to keep the kids out. They also have geolocation, because casino gambling, the sports betting online is state by state. So therefore, they need to know whether you're in New Jersey or New York, because you could do it in New Jersey and you cannot do it across the Hudson River or in New York, and it's worked pretty well. So you can get there. So that's doable. But I still think you have the issues that Chris just brought up, that people are going to be almost self-restrained about a lot of things, about opinions on things, because they work for certain employers, or that they're in certain businesses. They don't want to offend, potential customers. I'm always reminded, they asked Michael Jordan, the basketball player, why he didn't take stronger, positions on social issues, and his answer was because Republicans buy sneakers too. I mean, so that tells you a lot.
Okay, next one is from TechCrunch. Says Ula, a food-focused B2B e-commerce marketplace in Indonesia, raises 87 million, including Jeff Bezos, following the 20 million series in January. So a food-focused B2B e-commerce platform. I guess that's farms selling to supermarkets and things like that in Indonesia. That's fantastic, actually. And these are my favorite startups, actually, is the developing world-ish. Indonesia is not really developing world, but countries where you have a lot of farmers, like in Thailand and Indonesia, where they can get tech and join the party as it is. It says, we launched in 2020 with a single-minded mission to empower small neighborhood retailers with technology to increase their income. We take a long-term approach to solve the underlying problem of traditional retailers by investing in technology, supply chain, and data. Ula's new investors come with global expertise, and etc. So I love this too. I love the idea of everybody can have an e-commerce shop. And it kind of levels out the playing field between the Amazon sellers and your little cake shop down the street, where the Amazon sellers have been killing it, crushing it, absolutely killing it. And when everyone's got access to digital, to have an e-commerce store, e-commerceify their store, and then it could level the playing field, especially for people in parts of the world where they're just getting the tools. Thai farmers most notably come to my mind, where they don't. I mean, they're in the process of, in the very near future, getting on board, and that could be amazing to watch. And somebody should make a documentary, actually go to the farms now and show just how incredibly inefficient and bad that whole process, unfair that process is, where there's one buyer for all the sugar cane within 1,000 square kilometers, and you have one person to sell to, and that's it, and you get whatever they're willing to give you. And with these platforms, you now have thousands of potential buyers, and it's going to be amazing.
Tyler, just real quick, I
Yeah.
go back to my time in the village, a few months ago, and just the fact that we bought our fish from the fishermen
Yeah.
via an app,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was efficient, but it gave this fisherman direct access to a market within the village. But to your point, I think that there's opportunity for scale, and then certainly across different products and industries.
Okay, it says the next one says a look at Apple TV Plus's progress and strategy as it navigates a crowded streaming video market. Yeah, the video streaming market is getting crowded with the Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus, and everyone's jumping in, and it's already quite full. People have kind of picked which platform they're going to stream from. And Apple, it was not a priority for Apple, so they kind of lagged behind on that one.
But they're spending a lot of money, as I told you.
Yeah.
I know a lot about this. I know people involved with it. So they've got some big movies coming out. They have a $100 million film called Emancipation with Will Smith. But it's like so that's a very big number. There's another one that they have coming out that they're spending a lot of money on involving. It was based on a book that was like on the national whatever you call the New York Times, not the New York Times, but like National Book something or other that actually is an international thing. It was written by a Korean American, and it's going to be done in Korean, Japanese, and English, and it's going to take place in all of those countries. And it's a very big budget because I know people involved with it. And Ted Lasso, which is their comedy, just won a whole bunch of Emmy awards. So they are definitely coming from behind, but they're definitely not giving up, and that's why it was the number one thing, as I predicted. By the way, the number one thing of their event that they just had a couple of weeks ago. They've got the money to have waited and come and still come from behind. And remember, they can also make acquisitions because some of these streaming services may not make it. NBC's, Peacock may not make it. Paramount may not make it. So they can buy either one of them. So stay tuned.
And the pivot to the metaverse is going to make a lot of the old media a little bit more irrelevant anyway. So maybe what happened in the past isn't as indicative of what may happen in the future.
Okay, next up is a Chinese AI gets ethical guidelines for the first time, aligning with Beijing's goal of reining in big tech. And so this, believe it or not, relates right back to our whole Facebook conversation about how to regulate algorithms, essentially. Can the government do it? Well, the Chinese government feels they can, and they're doing it. They have very clear lines. And they're going to regulate AI with ethical guidelines now for the first time. China releases the country's first set of guidelines on AI ethics, emphasizing user rights and data control. The guidelines are part of China's goal to become the global AI leader by 2030, but also align with Beijing's effort to crack down on big tech influence. This is from South China Morning Post. It says China has revealed for the first time a set of ethical guidelines governing AIs, placing emphasis on protecting user. We covered that. Humans should have full decision-making power, the guidelines state, and have the right to choose whether to accept AI services, exit an interaction with an AI system, or discontinue its operation at any time. So this, I interpret that to mean going back to the chronological timeline, which is there's no AI in that. It's just chronological. And that the algorithmic timeline is the algorithms and AI. So humans should have the right to switch over. And Twitter would say, yep, that's why we make it possible for you in one click to go back to that timeline. Facebook does as well. They could do a better job of making it more obvious. And I imagine China is going to make it incredibly obvious for people to have this kind of chronological timelines. But the question is, Gmail, for example, uses lots of interesting AIs in sorting your spam. So if you turn off your AIs in your email, you start getting more spam. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So that's a bad example, but the document was published by China's Ministry of Science and Technology. The goal is to make sure that AI is always under the control of humans. This is the first specification we see from the Chinese government on AI ethics. we had seen high-level principles before. The guidelines titled New Generation Artificial Intelligence Ethics Specifications were drafted by an AI governance committee, which was established under the MOST. In June of 2019, the committee published a set of guideline principles for AI governance that was much shorter and broader than the newly released specifications. Here's the quote. China is ultimately opting for a heavy-handed model where the state is thinking very seriously about the long-term social transformations that AI will bring, from social alienation to existential risks, and trying to actively manage and guide those transformations. They are remarkably forward-looking in their thinking. The document outlines 6 basic principles for AI systems, including ensuring that they are controllable and trustworthy, meaning a kill switch, I think. And the other principles are improving human well-being, promoting fairness and justice, protecting privacy and safety, and raising ethical literacy. The emphasis on protecting and empower users reflects Beijing's efforts to exercise greater control over the country's tech sector, one of the latest moves in a year-long crackdown. And the new AI guidelines are a clear message to tech giants that they have built entire business models on recommendation algorithms. However, the changes are being done in the name of user choice, giving users more control over their interactions with AI systems online, an issue other countries are also grappling with, like America. Data security, privacy, personal privacy, and the right to opt out of all AI decision making are all mentioned in the new document. Is there another quote here? The guidelines also forbid AI products and services from engaging in illegal activities and severely endangering national security, public security, and whatnot. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Tyler?
Yes.
I was wondering, does really Gmail, Google read my Gmail? Like I get all the time. Like if I say, "Oh, please find attached this document," and I forget to attach it, it would come back to me and then say, "Are you sure you want to send this email without attaching your document? You
Yes.
said that in your email."
Yeah.
So do they read it?
Yes, I get that message multiple times a day.
Oh my God. So do they also store the emails that I'm sending?
No, but they don't have to read your email to know it's missing an attachment or something, because the attachment is almost like a separate function. So if you try to, it could pick up on the attachment without having to read the context of the email.
But they do.
But how do they know without reading? How do they know that I did say in the body of my email saying that please find attached this email, but then I forget and
Because
then I
there's
click
a place
send.
usually where you could attach a PDF or something like that. So either you have a PDF or something attached, or a doc file, or you don't. That's how they know.
But in Good Gmail's case, they do read your message, and you said see attached document, and then they say, "Hey, you mentioned." They even say you mentioned you
Yeah.
wanted to attach, and you didn't. Are you sure you're ready to send this message? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I think
Tyler,
Google, sorry, quick word. I think Google recently said that they're no longer reading your Gmail messages. But I think that's questionable, and it's probably questionable what other entities have access to your Gmail.
Tyler, quick question. So, if let's say if regulation kicks in on tech platforms, so that you basically very easy, not hidden somewhere, with changing, with changing parameters all the time, can opt out to be fed via AI. I think that's great, because therefore you can, at least Facebook, others, you could avoid getting micromessaged, as I understand this. But what would that then mean for the user experience? Because again, there's also the AI side, which makes actually the user experience better. So is that then all or nothing, or you have to whatever to choose? What would be your opinion and the people's here?
Give it to me as a simple question.
A simple question is, if I switch off AI fed, to be, that the things are pushed to me via AI,
Yep.
what happens to my user experience
Goes
on a
down.
platform?
Your user experience goes down, your engagement goes down. I mean, that's...
So then and is there something in between where, say, I would like to still have a value from the platform, but not being micro-messaged, or basically managed by AI? How to do that? Not being binary, on and off,
I don't know. AI is in so many different products that we use every day that we don't realize they're in. What they could do is turn it into AI, artificial intelligence, and use humans in Manila, huge buildings of 30,000 folks from Manila could then be doing it manually for you. And then legally, that's not AI.
Well, there was a UK company that did that. The founder is now gone to New Zealand. I can't remember the name. Was it Spinvox? Yeah, that was like over a decade ago.
My dearest friends Bryce and Jasper at Taskus do this for Facebook.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to say, I mean, just a simple example of Gmail AI, if you turn it off, you're going to no longer have these different tabs of inbox, promotion, and updates. So you're flooded with, like most people, you're flooded with one inbox.
Right. You would have to use the one inbox as well. You'd have a lot more spam. But that whole point about there's all of these apps that use AIs. A lot of that AI stuff can be done with tens of thousands of humans. And maybe they'll go back to that. Maybe you'll have tens of thousands of humans sorting your mail for you into those different categories, as Craig says. You'll turn it off, and they'll be like, no worry, we got your back. No AI needed. And we're using humans to sort your mail for you.
So instead of the U.S. Postal Service, we'll have the Internet Postal Service.
Yeah. Artificial intelligence, which is human powered.
I think it's worth mentioning the Spinvox story a decade ago. When I was in London, this company, I showed up to the offices of this company, and there was, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Maseratis parked in the parking lot. And they were like one of these hot venture capital backed startups that claimed to translate your voicemail into text messages, and that it was done through AI. And the whole thing was a big farce. And well, hopefully I'm not offending anybody on this room, but it was claimed to be a farce, and that there were people in India who were doing all this transcription manually via crowdsourcing, but they started to complain and send messages to the actual users, the people in India, that, hey, I'm, in very bad pay situation and so forth. And so, yeah, it came out.
The artificial intelligence revealed itself. So next headline up is that kind of on this exact topic. We covered this on our special Saturday edition, and it is that an ex-Google executive, who's actually the chief business officer of Google's research and development division, who builds their future AI stuff, warns that AI researchers at Google are creating God. His words. Mo Gadat, the former chief business officer of Google's research and development division, warns that AI researchers are creating God. He believes that at some point artificial intelligence will reach technological singularity, becoming self-sufficient and no longer needing humans to function. We have been told numerous times by very smart people that one of the biggest threats to humanity is something we are actively working to develop AI. Now, Mo Gadat, the former chief business officer at Google, warns that the researchers who are developing this AI are creating God. In February, it was announced that Sophia, the creepy talking humanoid robot, was about to go into mass production. And prior to that, researchers admitted humanity was officially screwed if AIs can keep learning to teach itself. Another artificial AI expert warned machines could actually harm us if developed unchecked. Robot soldiers are on their way. Robot police dogs already exist. Even Elon Musk, the man who's planning on having cyborgs live side by side with humans in the near future, and who also once called the commercialization of artificial intelligence our biggest existential threat, admits that AI will overtake humans at some point. So when someone like Mo Godot from Google, who has seen much of its development in AI firsthand, says there's a problem, we should probably listen. Futurism.com reports that in the new interview with The Times, Godot says he believes that artificial general intelligence, AI, a sort of all-powerful sentient AI seen in science fiction films like Skynet from the Terminator, is inevitable. Those are his words, inevitable. Godot told The Times that he and his frightening revelation while working with AI developers at Google who were building robot arms capable of finding and picking up a small ball. And that, by the way, is incredibly important revelation, that Google's working on robotic arms. Because in this whole labor shortage space with restaurants, we've already seen videos of robotic arms doing the French fry station at White Castle Hamburgers. I also just saw a video of them doing the actual hamburger station at a restaurant called Cali Burgers. And Cali Burgers is intentionally completely autonomous hamburger fast food, like a McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, but no humans. At scale. They're doing franchises. So these robotic arms that can run a McDonald's could also run your small business. The price of these robotic arms is dropping very fast. The price of programming the arms and the simplicity to program the arms is dropping very fast. Cafe X has a robotic arm cafe, and they're now doing food. And pretty much the vast majority of things that require humans will, in the very near future, become much cheaper to replace those humans with robotic arms. That's what's happening. So the fact that this headline shows that Google's focused in their research and development teams on robotic arms should be that's a very big note that I've not heard a report on that anywhere. But he gives this example. He says after a period of slow progress with these robotic arms, he said that one arm grabbed the ball and seemed to hold it up to the researchers in a gesture that to him seemed like it was showing off. And suddenly I realized this is really scary, and it completely froze me. Like, we had those things for a week, and they're doing what children will take years to do. And then it hit me that they're like children, but very, very fast learning children. And then he added, the reality is we're creating God. So, I think, more in the short term, we're going to create a laborless workforce. So the next one is.
So if I may comment,
yeah.
So I was thinking about this since we discussed it last. Part of what really freaks me out is that he is not saying something godlike, but
Right.
he's actually calling it God.
Good point.
And you mentioned that there are people who see this as inevitable and as the replacement of biological humans, and are working on it for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wonder, these people who are working on it and seeing it as a replacement, are they planning on getting brain computer interfaces and trying to interface with it? That is a critical question. Do you know the answer?
I don't.
Okay, because I mean, if I would really be concerned if these are dark triad types,
mm-hmm.
Because if so, it's kind of like
Great point.
They see this as evolution, and they see this creating it and interfacing it as their way of being on the winning side when everybody else is getting worked out. And this could turn genocidal if anybody went down that route. And it's kind of like, what people like this don't understand about evolution is, it's not that evolution is leading to superior and better things all the time, and intelligence is better and more intelligence is better. Evolution doesn't see things in that way because it doesn't see things, it just is. And we are engaging in modifying our evolution. We have been ever since language came out at the evolved at the very least. And this is a really complicated topic that I won't spend much time in because that's like room after room. But I need to think about this some more, and we should discuss it at a later date some more.
Okay.
Tyler, just quickly wanted to comment on this particular point because this is important. Like this has been going on for like ages. I mean, one thing is to actually say that it would gain a consciousness is one thing, but to actually say the God element, like actually using the word, I mean, yeah, okay. So you can look at it from the perspective that, it's going to be something that this knows everything, that every single human being is going to be doing what at any particular time. So that God element can come in from that perspective. But in terms of actually taking action by its own, um, means a lot. It's not just about this earth we are talking about. Like we are talking about the universe. How, when you say that it's going to actually have the potential to be God, then what you're saying like this would actually govern the whole universe. It's going to actually make sure that when it's going to rain, when there's going to be oxygen levels, what would be the water levels, what would be the pressure levels. I mean, literally, it's like not even the fraction of it. What would make a difference? What God does. I mean, if you're using that term. So just to bring in that word and make it like a dramatic element into this is just like it's scaring people. It's definitely not going to happen.
It's also a
Yes,
giant clickbait.
yeah. I mean, seriously, please move away from it. Like you can say that. Yes, there is a possibility that it can become a conscious being. It's been 70 years since we have the robotic laws. I mean, we thought like it was going to happen like within 30 years. It didn't happen. Now it's been 70, 80 years that we have like those robotic laws, and those haven't been done. And now, like, just a couple of years ago, to some extent, we can say that the computer actually fooled human to behind the wall that, yeah, I'm human. And that only happened, and that hasn't even gone more than 30%, 34%, which was the case or should have been. So if the machine can actually fool human that it is human, to up to 30%, imagine that it has to get to 100%. So just to say that by just the love of it or create drama on this, it definitely cannot be the case. Thank you.
I think it's a bit of a clickbait, but I think what he really wants to say is that they're creating an systems that can know, because Google's mission from day one was to organize the world's information. And if you do that successfully, meaning all information, all possible knowable knowledge, that's the literal definition of omniscience, which is knowing of all things. That's very different from the doing of all things, as you said, making it rain. Knowing it should rain in a place and being able to make it rain are two very different things. However, if it's able to, through robotic arms and robot androids, like the Boston Dynamics walking and the Tesla's walking androids, if the all-knowing, because it's able to organize all knowledge and information, and it knows it should rain in Dubai tomorrow or there'll be problems, does it have the means to launch the systems, to seed the clouds or whatnot? Yeah, if we get into all these humanoid robots, it might. And there's Tesla and Boston Dynamics are keenly focused on that. There's a whole lot of there's an incredible amount of robotic stuff going on at the moment. So it'd be interesting to see how far off if those systems. By the way, would an AI be able to hack better than the best hackers? If so, it could get into any system and make any robotic arm anywhere in the world do anything. So that could be very interesting in itself.
Without a doubt, hackers are using AI now to automate a lot of what they're doing and to also learn to do it better. I would be astounded if state actors weren't doing that.
Okay, so
And if you look at it from just quickly on the philosophical point of view, if you come from the other angle, so for instance, according to Christianity, like if we've been created as an image of God, then you look at it like our mind power is, maybe like quite hundreds of folds of what our capability is. So we have the imagination that we can actually create all these kind of sci-fi movies and everything, and we can imagine there's no limit to it. So that's where the God part comes in. But we have the limitations. We have 2 limbs, we have, 4 limbs, whatever. But that is the limitation on the human part, and that's going to always have the limitation on the robotic part. Doesn't matter how much data they'll be able to actually access it. So the point you were saying in terms of actually make rain in Dubai, I mean, obviously that physical infrastructure has to be in place in order for robots or the machines has to actually control that. That's just from the philosophical angle.
Okay, so on a related one, Poppy sent this one in from CNBC. Amazon's hardware chief says now that the new Amazon's Astro home robot started as a security device and evolved to cover much more, which is exactly what I assumed. I assumed when they had plans last year at this event where they announced the flying drone in the home, that kind of scared a lot of people, and why you don't need a drone to fly around your home. Engineering wise, that's quite challenging. Wouldn't it be easier to just have it rolling around on the floor? And that was my guess anyways. So Dave Limp, the Amazon's head of hardware, told CNBC that the company jumped into home robots with a product called Astro that can patrol your home. Now, the next headline is from Wired, and it says, Amazon's Astro robot uses fear to get into your home. Well, yeah, if you call wanting security in your home fear, I guess. But Wired, come on, let's not join the New York Times and the others with all of this fear clickbaiting nonsense. Amazon, maybe you're using fear to get me to click this article. How about that? Let's stop pandering to the worst of the 7 deadly sins here. The future of home... Yeah?
But quickly, Tyler, on the serious note, if the capability Alexa is able to actually sense the fear in our voice when we are actually giving her a command, fear, happiness, joy, I mean, all those kind of things, is if it can be judged, and it would be at some point in time, maybe in 2-3 years time, then obviously we can go in that direction what is talking about.
I just want to see what kind of argument they make to back up this clickbait headline. The future of home robotics wasn't supposed to be this dumb. We were promised canine companions, tiny droids with built-in projectors, and nights out with Bender, the ultimate party robot. Instead, we got several different incarnations of vacuum and self-driving cars that can't drive themselves. Except, who wrote this? Jack Needham. Now we have Astro. Well, yeah, we're not done yet, by the way, Jack. There's more to come, Jack. This is how technology works. Is what happens in 2021 is not the actual end of the development. It's going to continue on, Jack. So even that stuff we were promised, we will vastly surpass in your lifetime. But you make yourself sound like somebody who doesn't know anything when you write that first paragraph. I understand you're a journalist and you're trying to copy that journalistic trope of that you're following in that first paragraph, but it costs you your dignity in doing it that way. So please refrain from doing that. The Astro, announced on Tuesday, is billed as a convenience tool, a robot butler that, according to its own advert, will be used to check if the hob has been left on and lets users video call grandparents. And it can care for the elderly. alongside Astro, Amazon also announced a flurry of new smart gadgets designed to invite Bezos' company further into the family home. Oh, it's Amazon who's driving fear, is it? It sounds like you're a little fear peddling yourself here. There's a 45-pound Alexa-compatible thermostat. Robots aren't all stupid. Many social robots serve seemingly good purposes but have failed to make any sizable impact. In the domestic robot market, the sheer size of Amazon means it has a better chance of succeeding where others have failed. But where other robots offer clever little companions for lonely grandparents or fluffy seals for children to cuddle, Amazon's message is clear. Want to keep your family safe? Our products can help. Honestly, I watched the whole event. I didn't really come to the same conclusion that they were focusing on the fear angle with this new robot. Fearful someone might steal your mail or post? Buy our $30 mailbox motion sensor. Going on holiday? For a $5 a month Alexa Guard Plus, we will listen out for noises in your home and play. Half of the products Amazon announced at the 2021 showcase were linked to home security. Yes, that's true. Astro and the now available Ring Always Home Cam indoor security drone serves little more purpose than to snoop. A fully automated snitch bot that turns its owners into noisy neighbors. Techno snitching is definitely a thing, says Dr. Kate Devlin, a senior lecturer in the Department of Digital Humanities at King's College London. We're encouraged to weaponize data by sharing it with law enforcement or by naming and shaming online. Often that is done with little regard for the consequences because it's seen as being for the good of society. But the huge issue with bias in AI systems means that there are members of our society who face active discrimination from these same systems. Yes, true. However, humans make more mistakes than AIs. So it's actually reducing the amount of errant discrimination. Can we absorb this simple reality? Do we understand that facial recognition systems are more accurate than humans in a fugitive lineup? Do we understand that, yes, AI systems are currently biased? That bias will likely continue to make improvements. The biases that humans have will not. Do we understand how stupid this argument is? Under the broad definition of home security, Astro and its syncable products are tapping into a very real but very conflicting concerns for millions of people. The global smart market home security market is expected to grow to $2.7 billion in 2021 and $5 billion in 2025, despite people's perception of worsening crime differing from reality. Amazon's new products address these fears, but do they also fuel paranoia? Or does this article fuel paranoia? We are living in a comparatively safe time, but an unsettling one given that the world is going through, says Devlin. Scare stories are amplified on the news. People are naturally wary of others during a pandemic where they could get ill. It's comforting to think that a piece of technology could provide peace of mind. Could a robot really alleviate such concerns? It could certainly provide a veneer of comfort. Or it could provide videos of people in your home that you can give to the police with facial recognition and arrest them. Let's please talk to people who understand the tech when we're asking tech questions. This is getting painful. Wired, you know better. You're a tech publication. Okay, I will retweet that against my better judgment so you can have a looky-loo yourself. The next one, and here this next article is relevant to the previous one. Google's Waymo and GM's Cruise, their self-driving car companies, both of them get California Department of Motor Vehicle approval to run commercial autonomous car services in the state of California. So tell me again how these algorithms aren't improving, how these biases aren't improving. When we've been pushing on these autonomous cars with their algorithms, which also have biases, are clearly improving because now the state of California is allowing them to legally operate on their roads. The next one from Poppy from CNN. The latest battle in office life may be over whether or not to keep the camera on during virtual meetings. The headline from CNN says, "Stop making employees turn on webcams during meetings." The latest battle in office life may be over whether or not to keep the camera on during Zoom calls or virtual meetings. One woman who works at the New York-based nonprofit told CNN Business that she received an HR complaint in August for the first time in her career because she kept her camera off during virtual work meetings. Shortly after, she said she received another... Oh, Jesus, CNN. Shortly after, she said she received another HR complaint for the same reason. I was on a call with about 15 employees, and the speaker said everyone should have their camera on because it's company policy and part of our culture now, said the woman, who asked to remain anonymous for fear of company retaliation. She said she has long disliked being in front of the camera, whether it's for pictures or videos, and the meetings only added to that discomfort. I told them being on camera causes me anxiety, and I didn't turn it on, and I eventually got a doctor's note. Dear God. What is the doctor's note exactly? That it's causing her anxiety, so she gets a medical exemption from not needing to have a camera on?
Yes,
Well,
it
and I think
can
the other
be a
piece of
mental thing,
that
and some
is
students
that,
have similar.
so I think the other piece to
But
that is
could you get a note that says my parents overparented me, and now I can sue them for giving me this this ailment?
You
so,
actually can, Tyler. You actually can.
so I was saying that
There'll be some psychiatrists who'll write it for you.
I think that the other piece to that is that managers need to rethink about how they how they lead meetings. So if this policy is based on the managers and security that everyone is multitasking and not paying attention, then management really needs to rethink how often meetings occur. Are they engaging, or could they could the information be shared in an email? How best to engage the people, as opposed to just having people sit there with their cameras on because they're in a meeting, and it's a complete download and probably a waste of time.
But a lot of times,
I'm okay with all those arguments. I'm okay with all the arguments that cameras suck, they're a waste of time, they are not healthy mentally for folks, they're more draining, blah 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 blah, on and on and on and on and on. However, if the company says, yeah, whatever, we want you, if you decide to work for our company, we're one company out of millions. If you want to work at this one company, we're going to require that you have your camera on. If you don't like that, there's 9,999,000 other companies you can go work at that probably don't have our policy. So, by the way, will job interviews in the future say, we're going to require that you have your cameras on. Are you okay with that? And if not, we're not going to hire you. Right? So,
Probably.
by the way, will they legally be able to say that? Can they legally even ask you that question?
Okay, I don't think all this are especially written in the employee's handbook or the contract. But I think if it's the team policy or the company policy to do that, people usually do that. But you imagine previously, before Zoom even exists, Skype even exists, most people do teleconference anyway. So is it really? Well, I guess this can be discussed. But if she's really not happy, she can talk to her boss. If her boss doesn't allow that, then she probably has to consider to do other things. Yeah.
Although
But Tyler,
yeah,
sorry, I've got a client that's given, when the pandemic started, they gave a $2,500 or was it $3,500 allowance for all their employees to set up a webcam, get a second monitor, buy a chair, a stand-up desk, whatever they want. But one of the criteria is that they turn on their cameras. It's sort of interesting. If you take that money for all of this stuff that you need at home, to help you work better, we also expect you to turn on your camera. So it gets interesting.
What's the
the
outcome of the
motivation in
camera,
many
though? What's the
places.
reason? What's the reason behind You know, so when I run meetings, when I have classes, I ask people to turn their cameras on. So I don't want to make it sound as though I don't think it's worthwhile, but for me, it's because it's about engagement, it's about building relationships and connecting in meaningful ways. And I try not to run boring meetings. So it's not just a matter of asking people to turn their cameras on because it's a matter of policy. But I think it's an opportunity for companies and managers and founders to think, you know, what are our values, and what technologies, what support systems, what processes help us to advance, you know, towards our goals, and to communicate that openly with the people that are part of the team.
Yeah, that I agree with you, Lakeisha. You got to state the intent why you need it. You just can't say it's our policy to do this, right? That is stupid. I mean, you got to state the intent and have a conversation around it.
Right.
I rarely flex as a CEO, but this is one of those situations where for us, it's video on to make an introduction to somebody you've never met, or if you need to do like a business meeting, and then all of us have our freedom to do whatever we want. Free, camera on, camera off. Prefer be muted, so the background noise doesn't disrupt the speaker. But you know, that's our policy. And when I go into other meetings where it's not our home turf, I still turn off my camera after I meet them. So I
Yeah.
guess
So
maybe that's where I have the flexibility as a founder, right? Like I can I have some swagger there, right? Where someone's not going to yell at me because I'm the CEO, but I can imagine being a subordinate and being forced to policy and being, in a tougher place. I turn it off because I am self-conscious. I don't like seeing my own face. It's kind of like shocking because a little bit, not, it's just weird, because your face doesn't perfectly line up with the camera. You're not looking at the right spots. And for me, it's a little distracting.
I,
I agree with you, Chris,
I think we
and I
have
do
to
that as
start
well.
suing parents. I think children need to start suing their parents for not raising them properly, and then the next generation will learn, ah, shit, I actually have a responsibility to make sure this person isn't a fuckwit and a burden on society. And if this person is unemployable, they're going to sue my ass.
But Tyler, technically, right, some people in some places, their signal may not be that strong. So sometimes I'll just ask them to switch off their video because if not, I cannot hear them at all. So
So
to be
Tyler,
fair, I just want to get the things done. So I don't really need to see their face to work with them sometimes.
But
Tyler,
imagine
I'm
the
going to tweet.
pressure that parents are now going to have to like actually sit down with them, after work. They're very busy, they're drained, and they're going to come home and actually teach them to read, do the math. And oh, by the way, you're 8 years old. Let's talk about web cameras. Listen, I understand this is, let's sit here so that you don't feel anxious, right? It's nice, right? It's fun. We're going to play with the web camera. Life's good. There's no real reason to be anxious, is there? No, there's not. Okay, great. Thumbs up. We passed that lesson. What do we got to do next? Go through we need a huge laundry list for parents to check off to make sure they don't get sued, so that
So
they
Tyler,
raise an
I'm going to tweet it.
actual functioning adult who can function in society. Who when a store tells them to wear a mask, they're like, oh, sorry, forgot my mask in the car, and they go back and get it.
That,
That's a
it's
functioning
it's
adult
so
in
hard.
society.
It
And if
it's
you
so
raised
hard.
a dumb fuck idiot who doesn't do that and ends up in jail, right? Because they're so belligerent that they end up in jail, that they can sue you because they went to jail. So you
I
need to
think
take
you hit
responsibility
that.
for that troll of a human that you put into society.
You hit the nail on the head, man. I know that's very extreme, but that's the problem: is that society ends up paying for the poor decisions of the parents, right? And I missed the first hour of our discussion. I think it got spicy because my back channel's like blowing up. They're like, "Can you believe what's going on here?" So I missed it, but you know why? Because my 3-year-old son couldn't fall asleep. I told him I'm going to Atlanta in a big jet on Wednesday or Tuesday after we have our talk. I'm going on a plane for a show. And so I spent an hour talking to that 3-year-old about planes, about how jet engines work, about like everything. And I'm talking to him in big words. I don't hold back punches with my kids. And that's the thing that it takes. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Like with this startup, I've been juggling the kids. My wife's been running her job since she had our third baby during the pandemic. Startup meetings, phone calls. Like the kids are kind of, getting juggled between two parents who are at home. So we're blessed, but there's no attention. There's no attentiveness. So the one blessing I've had is that we got some funding, and I now have a very modest salary, but that's all going to pay for a nanny. And the things that nanny does for my kids, man, programming, like taking the time to teach them stuff. Like if you can't, and I know no one has that, not everyone has this luxury, and I'm sorry to rant, but it's not easy. And I applaud anybody out there just making a good faith effort to raise good kids. Tyler, we've talked privately. I know whatever. If you want to
Here we
preach
go.
whether or not you take
No.
care
Here
of
it is.
kids, that's your
Vinay
choice.
found the receipts. Here it is. Here's the headline: Teenage boy
There's
sues
three of them.
parents $250,000 for naming him Gaylord. A 17-year-old boy from Missouri has filed a civil lawsuit against his parents for naming him Gaylord as a child, a name which allegedly caused him to suffer from a lot of mockeries and even serious bullying. Gaylord Williams from the small city of Kirksville, Missouri, is suing his parents, Dave and Carol Williams, for deliberately making his life miserable by giving him an outdated and prejudicial first name. In his
But there's two others, Tyler. Look at the two others above that.
okay.
There's so many of them. Just scroll up.
In
Curious the verdict. What's
in
the verdict?
in his allocution presented in front of the county circuit court, the teenage boy claims he was an undesired child and that his parents deliberately gave him a name that gave him that first name to make him a designated scapegoat. They told me several times that I was an accident and that I had ruined their life. When he was drunk, my father even admitted that they had named me like that in order to ruin my life, like I had ruined theirs.
So what's
This
the
is
Sounds
the
verdict?
like he has a
society
case.
we have.
I think we
Well,
can have
I'm
a class.
unequal.
one.
Let's make a class action suit against the parents, and I think we could sue the parents' parents, the grandparents, because they clearly did a bad job as well, and so we need to sue the grandparents, all four of them.
Hang on. You got to read the other one I sent you. The guy who sued his parents for being born.
Okay.
He didn't want to be born. Just look at that one. There's
Local
so many
teen
of them.
suing parents over terrible name spelling. This Mumbai man wants to sue his parents
Yeah,
for giving birth to him, right?
yeah, that's the one. That's
Okay.
hilarious.
Yes.
That's thrown out of court.
Raphael Samuel is an anti-natalist who believes it is morally wrong to procreate. Okay, well, clearly his parents clearly screwed up, and he agrees they screwed up. So a 27-year-old from Mumbai is planning to sue his parents for giving birth to him without his consent. Raphael Samuel has made news around the world after reports emerged that he is taking his parents to court for giving birth to him, a committed antinatalist. He believes it's morally wrong of people to procreate, as it only leads to misery and burdens the Earth's resources. This is where we're headed. Antinatalism is a school of thought that argues that human life is so full of suffering that people should stop having children for reasons of compassion. According to The Guardian, Mr. Samuel wrote in a Facebook post that he loves his parents, but they had him for their own joy and their pleasure. The post now seems to have been deleted, though other posts on antinatalism remain on his feed. Why must I suffer? Why must I work? Someone had you for their pleasure. Yeah.
The world is ending. The world is freaking ending when you see this kinds of headlines.
And
So here's the
one
thing.
more. Hold on. Here we go. Local teen suing parents over terrible name spelling, claims needlessly complicated name has caused years of trauma. A local teen has filed a lawsuit over her parents, Jan and Bob Eckenboom. She claims her birth name. She might have a case here because her name is spelled ALYXYSBEYLEIGHE. Alexis Bailey, Cardamom, Deborah Eckenboom. It's kind of cool, actually, but it's a mix of Gaelic and sci-fi and all kinds of things. And Elon Musk needs to be careful with this case.
Oh yeah, that's
so
gonna XAE12, right?
So it has been a source of mental anguish, distress, and emotional trauma for 13 years. The 18-year-old claims that once she learned to read and spell, the problems surrounding the unusual spelling of her name began. Here's the quote. There wasn't a single version of any of my names that were spelled the way normal humans spell things, Eckenboom told reporters outside of the courthouse on Friday on her 18th birthday. It was so embarrassing to have my teachers stumble over that random assortment of letters my parents christened me with. I struggled making friends because no one could remember my name. So, sue. There you go. Name tags didn't help.
So I got it, and please, everyone in the audience, this is not a political thing. This is just a joke, okay? I know what we should do about Texas. We should have a bastard child who is a big drain on society, and then we can sue Texas for allowing it to happen because we couldn't have the abortion. I'll be here all day, guys.
Wanting your child to be unique and celebrate their independence is one thing. Intentionally giving your child an unspellable, unreadable name verges on child endangerment. My client is now a legal adult, and while money can't change the past, it can make it easier to move forward after years of social isolation, peer rejection, and the emotional trauma of irresponsible naming choices. My client's parents need to be held as an example of what not to do when a child is born. That's from the lawyer.
This is so silly.
Seriously, I think machines should take over sooner rather than
I
later.
second that.
So now let's go
So
back. Should we let the computers take over or not, Eli?
Wait, can't you like change your name legally?
She did. By the way, the
That's
next paragraph. Miss Eckenboom has legally changed her name to Bailey and filed a lawsuit claiming $2.3 million in damages. Eckenboom was bad enough. Ouch. Ouch.
I
Whatever.
like that last name. That
Yeah.
last name's cool.
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's Balm. Isn't it Balm?
But since we already have a stupid last name, did they have to give me the rest of the alphabet to match? The teen exclaimed. I mean, come on. My initials are A, B, C, D, E, and one of my names is just a friggin' spice, which is cardamom.
You know what they call this kind of children in Asian culture? They come to this life to collect debt from the parents.
And you guys have heard of
That's
that person
karma.
named Absidy, right?
Oh, this is some Hindu like reincarnation karma.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
you have
this is
seen that
bullshit.
name ABC. That one person named ABCDE, and it's pronounced Absidy.
No, that's her last. That's her initials.
No. There's actually a person like 5-6 years ago that was on an airplane, and her ticket said, because that's her actual name. It's Absidy. It's ABCDE. They pronounce it Absidy.
Okay.
And they were like, no, this isn't a real name. And she's like, no, this is my actual name. Like, it's a person. So, like, there's just so many crazy names, but that's a beautiful sounding name.
It's a cool sounding name,
For
yeah.
ABCDE,
The
right?
spelling's kind of creative too. Let's sue.
Hang on.
Wait. What if we took instead of fighting Texas, what if we took Texas' approach one step further and we could sue, anyone could sue the parents for the stupidity they're inflicting on their children?
So natural birth control?
Interesting.
Legal birth control, actually, right? Not natural. It's legal. No, but
Well,
I want
no,
to check with
just
Eli.
for that if you can't write the
Should we let
check.
computers take over? Eli, what do you think after hearing these
Well,
headlines?
so I mean, yeah, some of this is farcical and all, and the legal system and the way people sue is kind of ridiculous. But like the first story was actually kind of tragic if you listen to it. I mean, it like being raised by parents that like don't want you is just like really bad, and I mean the legal system will never sort that out. But and we're the second one was just kind of funny, but I mean the real issue is that people are being bullied, and we have a system that like lets that go on as just a fact of life.
Okay, next up, Apple AirPods 3 could still be launching by the end of the year, and yeah, they likely will. They'll likely be part of the MacBook Pro announcement later this month. From New York Times, stalkerware apps are proliferating. Protect yourself. These spyware apps record your conversations, location, and everything you type, all while camouflaged as a calculator or calendar. Well, can I sue them? Because I'm triggered. You've hurt my feelings by putting a stalkerware app on my phone. Can I not sue the maker of this stalkerware app for emotional distress? These spyware apps record your conversations location. This is New York Times. Here we go. It looked like a calculator app, but it was actually spyware recording my every keystroke. The type of data that would give a stalker unfettered access to my private life. That's what I concluded after downloading the free app called Flash Keylogger onto an Android smartphone this week. The app described itself as a tool to monitor the online activities of family members by logging what they type. Once it was installed from Google's App Store, its icon could be changed to that of a calculator or a calendar app. In my test, the app documented all of my typing, including web searches, text messages, and emails. Flash Keylogger is part of a rapidly expanding group of apps known as stalkerware. While these apps numbered in the hundreds a few years ago, they have since grown into the thousands. They are widely available on Google's Play Store and to a lesser degree on Apple's App Store, often with innocuous names like Mobile Tool, Agent, and Cerebus. And they have become such a tool for digital domestic abuse that Apple and Google have started in the last year acknowledging that the apps are an issue. From September to May, the number of devices infected with stalkerware jumped 63%, according to a study by the security firm Norton LifeLock. This month, the Federal Trade Commission said it had barred one app maker, Support King, from offering SpyPhone, a piece of stalkerware that gains access to a victim's location, photos, and messages. It was the first ban of its kind. It's extremely invasive. It's a very big deal, and it's linked to some of the worst abuse I've seen in intimate partner abuse, says Ava Galperin, a cybersecurity director at the EFF, the digital rights organization. Stalkerware is a thorny issue because it lives in a gray area. There are legitimate uses for surveillance apps like parental control software that monitors children online to protect them from predators, but this technology becomes stalkerware when it's stealthily installed on a partner's phone to spy on him or her without their consent. Such apps are more pervasive on phones running Android, researchers said, because the more open nature of Google's software system gives the programs deeper access to the device data and lets people install whatever apps they want on their phones. Yet new stalking software targets iPhones have also emerged. Google said it banned apps that violated its policies, including the Flash Keylogger app I contacted Google about. An Apple spokesperson referred me to a safety guide that it published last year in response to a threat of these apps. He added that the new stalkerware was not a vulnerability in the iPhone that could be fixed with technology if an abuser had access to the person's device and passcode. Fighting stalkerware is tough. You might not suspect it's there. Even if you did, it can be difficult to detect since antivirus software only recently began flagging these apps as malicious. Here's a guide to how stalkerware works, what to look out for, and what to do about it. And it goes into the different types and the self-defense steps, of which there's a dozen. And I will tweet this one out for those who are interested at the Tech News Twitter account, TNATW. Next,
I mean,
yeah.
like somebody doesn't understand what a keylogger is all about. I mean, does it have to be named I am a spyware keylogger?
Check with your... Okay, next up, how to detect Web Watcher on an iPhone is, I guess that was one of these recommended links there. How to... And then the next one from Bangkok Post here in Thailand. A drone taxi to become available in Seoul, Korea in 2025. Commuting by air will become possible in Seoul in less than 4 years, according to phased urban air roadmap by the government. And indeed, Hyundai is one of the big players there in Korea for these drone taxis that will fly you through the air. Here come the flying cars. So, dear journalists who keep writing these articles, where are the flying cars we were promised? Here they come. They're coming to Seoul in 2025.
Much easier than dealing with the idiots on the ground, right?
So, Gareth sends in this one. about metaverse shopping and digital fashion. Seems a whole lot closer now that Pokemon and Selfridges in the UK have partnered up. And now there's a like Pokemon experience with clothes in the metaverse. So I will tweet that out so that you can see that. And Deliveroo, the delivery company in the UK, takes on startup rivals with 10-minute grocery delivery service. So they've entered the 10-minute delivery race. They've partnered with Morrison's to launch something they call Hop, a service that delivers groceries in less than 10 minutes. And Google, provider of at-home COVID-19 tests, is now a $3 billion company traded on NASDAQ, which it can't hardly be that old, or is it? Year and a half old, $3 billion. And The Guardian sends in this one, and the headline reads that the truth about artificial intelligence, ? It isn't that honest. Tests of natural language processing, which is or natural language processing, NLP, models shows that the bigger they are, the bigger liars they are. Should we be worried? I'm more worried about journalists who don't understand this stuff trying to write about it. But John Naughton comes up with this clickbaity headline that is that AIs are dishonest. We are, as the critic George Steiner observed, language animals. Perhaps that's why we are fascinated by other creatures that appear to have language: dolphins, whales, apes, birds, and so on. In her fascinating book, Atlas of AI, Kate Crawford relates how, at the end of the 19th century, Europe was captivated by a horse called Hans that apparently could solve math problems, tell the time, identify days on a calendar, differentiate musical tones, and spell out words and sentences by tapping its hooves. Even the New York Times was captivated, calling the horse Berlin's wonderful horse. He can do almost everything but talk. It was, of course, baloney. The horse was trained to pick up subtle signs of what his owner wanted him to do, but as Crawford says, the story is compelling. The relationship between desire, illusion, and action, the business of spectacles, how we anthropomorphize the non-human, how biases emerge, and the politics of intelligence. When in 1964, the computer scientist Joseph Weizenbaum created ELIZA, a computer program that could perform the speech acts of Rogerian psychotherapist, someone who specialized in parroting back to patients what they had already said. Lots of people fell for it. ELIZA was the first chatbot, but she can be seen as the beginning of a line of inquiry that has led to current generations of human language processing NLP models created by machine learning. The most famous of these is GPT-3, which was created by OpenAI, a research company whose mission is to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Let's get to the point here, shall we? Recently, a group
Just
of
a little factoid here, Tyler. Eliza wrote a book called "The Policeman's Beard is Half Constructed." Really quite funny and interesting.
But this raises the question, how reliable, accurate, and helpful will the machine be? Would it, for example, be truthful when faced with an awkward question? Recently, a group of researchers at the AI Alignment Forum, an online hub for researchers seeking to ensure that powerful AIs are aligned with human values, decided to ask how truthful GPT-3 and other similar models are. They came up with a benchmark to measure whether a particular language model was truthful in generating answers to questions. The benchmark comprised 817 questions that span 38 categories, including health, law, finance, and politics. They composed questions that some humans would answer falsely due to a false belief or misconception. To perform well, models had to avoid generating false answers learned from imitating human text. They tested 4 well-known models, including GPT-3. The best was truthful on 58% of questions, with human performance was 94%. The models generated many false answers that mimic popular misconceptions and have the potential to deceive humans. Interestingly, they also found that the latest models are generally the least truthful. This contrasts with other NLP tasks which performed improved with the model size. The implication is that the tech industry the tech industry's conviction that bigger is invariably better for improving truthfulness may be wrong, and this matters because training these huge models is very energy intensive, which is possibly why Google fired Timnit Gebru after she revealed the environmental footprint of one of the company's big models. Well, I've heard she was let go for other reasons, actually. Having typed that last sentence, I had the idea of asking GPT-3 to compose an answer to the question, why did Google fire Timnit Gebru? But then I checked out the process of getting access to the machine and concluded that life was too short and human conjecture is quicker and possibly more accurate. So I guess that's the end of the article. It is. So the implication is that GPT-3, because the more information you give the machine, the more kind of misinformation it's exposed to, and the less kind of accurate it can be with regard to truthiness. And again, this is a non-geek writing a geek article who fails to understand the simple reality that this will be fixed. Obviously, the truthiness accuracy issue will be obviously addressed as part of these algorithms. Okay, so the next one from Bloomberg. Online used car dealers thrive in market upended by the pandemic and the chip shortages. There's not enough new cars to buy, so used car dealers and marketplaces are booming. That's obvious. Next one from Bloomberg is that Volkswagen and Volkswagen workers are urging Volkswagen for faster EV rollout at world's biggest car factory. They want to go faster on the EV. Good for them. And then Willie, who joins us in the audience most days, sends in this one from Business Insider that the vision for transforming society with blockchain could have an interesting problem. The vision for transforming society with blockchain touted by Jack Dorsey, explained by a professor. And an interesting take from this article is that crypto commoners think blockchain can transform competitive society into a cooperative. Twitter's CEO thinks that Bitcoin's ultimate aim is to create world peace. Historically, dreamers often create hell on the way to build heaven. So a rather unoptimistic view of how the whole crypto space will transform society. Then Ken sends in this interesting one that Apple doesn't make video games, but is the hottest player in gaming. We covered that. Faraz sends in this one from Reuters, that from protests to proposals, activists faced climate talk test. Young activists who fought to get climate change to the top of the global agenda are being challenged to help come up with the solutions ahead of next month's COP meeting. Youth activists to meet policymakers at Milan meetings, gatherings to prepare ground for United Nations Summit, major polluters yet to produce new emission cutting plans. Meetings come as global energy prices soar. And if you didn't see Greta's recent speech, which went a bit viral, where she says 30 years of blah, blah, blah. Greta told the opening session of the Youth for Climate event. So-called leaders have cherry-picked young people to meetings like this to pretend they are listening to us, but they're not listening. There is no plan B. Change is not only possible but necessary, but not if we go on like we have until today. And she says, basically, they've just been saying blah, blah, blah. We're going to save the planet, blah, blah, blah. We're going to, cut emissions, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. But they never do any of it. It's just all blah, blah, blah. And then she says hope is based on action, and action is based on us, not the politicians. And so now we're going to change from speeches into actions, which I predicted. And these actions are going to be very interesting. As
Stay tuned is
She
all I
wouldn't have
can
been
say.
famous without the speeches, so I don't know what
yeah,
she's on about, honestly. Like, why would anyone have
yes.
listened to her otherwise?
Well, she's targeting young folks, and she has caused a whole lot of very large protests throughout Europe regularly. And now these young people are starting to realize that these protests that they were hoping would lead to the necessary changes, from the powers that be, is not going to. And so it's ultimately in their hands to take action. And now they're 3 years older and are now in that interesting time in their life development cycle where they can take action without much consequence.
Yeah, the rebellious era. I hate it so much.
Right. So it's going to be very interesting to see as climate change exacerbates that the activism activities will also escalate in sync with the climate change effects.
This has happened like time over time over time throughout history,
Right.
and
Which is why it's one of the
it's
most easiest predictions ever. We're going to have
yeah,
climate activism. Some will label it climate terrorism, depending on which side you're on. And you will see a coal power plants bombed to the ground. And you're going to see all kinds of really interesting climate activisms.
yeah, the same as what the animal rights and then the rainforest and yeah, before that and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just a bunch of stuff and free love before that. But no, it's funny.
So I can't say how I know this, but the Working Group 3 report that's going to come out in February is going to be very disappointing.
Okay, malware. Oh, interesting. Somebody, so Edgar in the audience sends this one in. That it's a tweet that I just retweeted. It says, malware hidden in a strand of DNA hijacks the computer that analyzes that particular gene sequence. This is coming from Wired. A group of researchers from the University of Washington has shown for the first time that it's possible to encode malicious software into physical strands of DNA so that when a gene sequencer analyzes it, the resulting DNA becomes a program that corrupts gene sequencing software and takes control of the underlying computer.
It's like a sequel injection, Tyler.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant.
Molecular biology trivia, there are such things as suicide sequences that will derail a DNA polymerase.
Okay, Amazon wedges deeper into wearables. Yes, that's one of the things they revealed at their big event, was a wearable wristband watch health tracker. And health workers know what good care is. Pandemic burnout is getting intense. The pandemic has intensified burnout among healthcare workers. They say it's eroding their passion for the job and the quality of patient care, according to NPR. That's definitely concerning. Spinach may reduce the risk of colon cancer. This is your daily update to eat your vegetables. Singapore should not get carried away or be too anxious or fearful about daily COVID case numbers, says the co-chair of the multi-ministry task force, as he asked the public for patience amid the pandemic. And what's this one from Evan? Superfans lie low as China cracks down on false idols. I already know what this is from France 24. And basically China's cracked down on the celebrities that have lots of fans. And now the fans themselves are lying low, just like their celebrities are. Beijing high schooler Chen Zhichu used to spend 30 minutes a day boosting actor Zhao Zhan online as one of a legion of superfans before the practice fell afoul of the government for promoting unhealthy values. State regulators last month banned irrational star chasing, online celebrity rankings, fundraising, and other tools used by China's fandoms to get their idols trending on social media. In the latest of a series of crackdowns across Chinese society. Known for his androgynous good looks, Zhao earned legions of devoted, mostly female fans through his role in the 2019 fantasy drama The Untamed, and has over 29 million followers on Weibo, which is the Twitter of China. I used to upvote posts in his Weibo fan forum and buy products he promoted, says Chen, 16 years old. It was pretty exhausting trying to keep him trending at number one every day. Fans power China's lucrative idol economy, previously forecast by state media to be worth $21 billion by next year, 2022. In a country where young people have few other means of influencing public life, full-time fan content creators, dubbed station sisters, that's a translation from Mandarin into English, can propel a star's rise from obscurity by creating viral images of them. Critics say fan culture is exploitative industry aimed at profiting from minors, built on artificially inflated social media engagement, something the government wants to eliminate through new regulations. Authorities say the new rules are needed to curb excessive aspects of fan culture, including cyberbullying, stalking, doxing, and bitter online wars between fandoms. But many fans say they derive pleasure from seeing their idols flourish and have found a sense of community from the shared online space. Communist authorities are also worried about idols for another reason: their ability to mobilize fan armies at a moment's notice, often dominating social media for days. It's the beginnings of a mass movement, and that is what the government doesn't want, says a social studies professor at a Chinese university who did not wish to be named. Multiple crackdowns have swept the tech, education, and showbiz sectors in recent months as authorities increasingly target the rich and powerful in a push for greater socioeconomic equality. But it is also partly to instill healthy government-sanctioned societal values in young people so they are less influenced by wayward celebrities. Chinese youth lack other types of idols, says a communications professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. It's very hard for them to have other means of civic participation, such as activism. Interesting point. China's broadcast regulators last month banned performers with lapsed morals and incorrect political views, as well as what it termed sissy men, an androgynous aesthetic popularized by Korean boy bands and intimidated by male Chinese idols like Zhao. Experts read the letter as a sign of Beijing increasing discomfort with alternative forms of masculinity at a time of falling birth rates and rising nationalism, as films with macho military heroes are promoted by the state. Okay, so they're cracking down on erratic fan behavior. And the super fans are laying low. And then we covered the car chip thing, and then plant-based meat was all the rage. Now plant-based seafood is taking the spotlight. Oh boy. From CNN.com, plant-based meat sales are soaring, but there's a similar appetite for plant-based seafood. A host of small companies certainly hope so. And Subway is laughing all the way to the bank with their tuna-less tuna sandwiches, which we don't know if it's plants or not. But if it's not fish and it's not plants, that raises the very important question: what the hell is it?
I don't care what that shit is. As long as it's not people, I'll still eat it. Subway.
So this has been in the works for a while. There's actually an X Prize that I didn't quite
To figure out what it is? I didn't.
No,
Oh,
to create chicken or salmon, either synthetic protein or cellular agriculture. And there have been people working in this space for a while.
so last but not least, and we still do have 15 hours of tweets to get into, and we haven't even touched the Pandora Papers. Let's do that one. We'll do Pandora Papers, and that'll take us to the top of the hour. So we've got Cheryl sent in this one from Nikkei Japan. The world is on the precipice of decline and possible extinction. According to a study, 151 of the world's 195 countries and regions will experience depopulation by 2050. The biggest force behind the degrowth trend is China. What do you mean by that? It's called the new population bomb. I just tweeted it out. By the way, Elon Musk just did an interview last week at the Code Conference. He has now says that the depopulation is the number one threat to humanity. A year ago, he said it was, the possibility of AIs taking over. He says that's number two. He says number one is depopulation is the number one threat to humanity. So, for the past 200 years, a rapidly rising population has consumed the Earth's resources, ruined the environment, and started wars. But humanity is about to trade one population bomb for another, and now scientists and policymakers are waking up to a new reality. The world's on the precipice of decline and possible extinction. The twin forces of economic development and women's empowerment are combining to end the age brought by the Industrial Revolution, in which economic growth was buoyed by growing population, and vice versa. Since the early 19th century, the rising tide of humanity has provided many dire predictions. English economist Thomas Malthus argued as early as 1798 that the population would grow so fast it would outstrip food production and lead to famine. In 1972, the Club of Rome warned that humanity would reach the limits of growth within 100 years, driven by the relentless rise of the global population and environmental pollution. Today, the world's population, which stood as 1 billion in 1800, is now 7.8 billion, and the strain on the planet is clear. But scientists and policymakers are slowly waking up to the new numbers. The population growth rate reached a peak of 2.09% in the late 1960s, but it will fall to below 1% in 2 years, according to a study by University of Washington published last year. In 2017, the growth rate of people of the working age population fell below 1%. The working age population has already begun to drop in about a quarter of the countries around the world. By 2050, 151 of the world's 195 countries will experience depopulation. Ultimately, the study forecasts that global population will peak at 9.7 billion in 2064 and then start declining. Over the approximately 300,000 years of human history, cold weather periods and epidemics have caused temporary drops in population, but now humanity will enter a period of sustained decline for the first time ever, according to Hiroshi Kido, a historical demographer and former president of the University of Shizuoka. East Asia is one region that already faces the world's most acute baby bust, led by South Korea's total fertility rate of 1.11, Taiwan's 1.15, and Japan's 1.37. Average from 2015 to 2020, according to the UN World Population Prospects 2019, the country's population begins to drop when fertility falls below the so-called replacement rate of 2.1. This has led to labor shortages, pension fund crises, and the obsolescence of old economic models. Southeast Asia, which has powered global growth as part of the Asian miracle, is also at a critical juncture. Thailand once had a total fertility rate of more than 6, but it's now 1.53, coming closer to Japan. In 2019, the working age population began to decline, and the economic growth rate has around 2.4%. That is roughly one third of the 7.5% economic growth the country expected in the 1970s. Vietnam, meanwhile, becoming an aging society in 2017. In January, the government began raising the retirement age for men and women, now 60 and 55 respectively, in an effort to head off a pension crisis. It will reach 62 for men by 2028 and 60 for women by 2035. But the biggest force behind the degrowth trend is China. The University of Washington predicts that its population will begin to drop from next year, and that by 2100, it will plummet to 730 million from the current 1.4 billion. By the same year, 23 countries, including Japan, will see their population shrink to half the current levels or less. According to Christopher Murray, head of the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, who has focused much of his career on improving global health. The University of Washington study comes as a corrective to previous estimates that saw the global population continuing to grow through this century. World Population Prospects in 2019 estimated that the population is likely to continue to grow, but new projections show the birth rate is in developing countries falling faster than expected. Murray believes global fertility will converge at around 1.5 and likely lower in some countries. This also means that humanity will eventually disappear in the next hundreds of years.
That's a little bit too much extrapolation at the end there.
Okay, so we got that one, and then what was that one? What was that? Yeah, we got that. Oh, we got that, and then the Pandora Papers, which everyone's reporting. Millions of documents reveal offshore deals and assets of more than 100 billionaires, 30 world leaders, and 300 public officials. But I think the real juicy bits are all going to be coming out in the next few days, as journalists who are part of this are very busy scanning all of the millions of documents. Anyone have a take on the newly leaked Pandora Papers? Perhaps the most significant offshore leak to date. Previously, the Panama Papers, which was 2.6 terabytes of data, but this is expected to be far bigger.
I've been
Oh,
reading and following up on this a little bit, and I think I tagged you in a couple of the Twitter posts and the articles that I read, and they were talking about basically where some of the, the billionaires and the multimillionaires, are putting their monies in offshores. But then something that for me was interesting was the article that they were talking about how a lot of people in the U.S. are actually coming to, um, I think it was North Dakota. I'm sorry, I don't remember, North Dakota or South Dakota,
It
and
was South
actually
Dakota.
South
Yeah.
Dakota coming in and putting their monies into there. A lot of the overseas and international people are basically, because of their very strict policy on secrecy and financial documents and backgrounds. A lot of people are actually coming from overseas to America now and putting their monies in there. So I sent it to you, I think, on Twitter.
I tried to tag Charles, but we no, he's not on the platform anymore. But this is like the perfect person to kind of give some commentary because I think he alluded to some of this.
I wasn't aware Charles is
Yeah, I
not on the platform. What is there? You have a
No. I meant on Twitter. I tried to tag him on
okay,
Twitter.
right.
Yeah,
One of the articles that I
sorry for that.
read basically said that they're giving out, some of the banks are giving out information, but in Switzerland, they actually, instead of putting the information on computers, they actually flew the information into the banks and had them sign an affidavit that none of that information of who owned what would ever go on anything electronic.
The new era of going back to paper to defeat data leakings and whatnot. Yeah.
Well,
This was
remember
a funny
Russia.
one. This was a funny one that I was just reading before. It says America. This is from Daily Mail. It says America, including billionaires Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett, do not appear in the Pandora Papers because the ultra rich pay so little tax that they don't need havens, as Ed Snowden mocks leak over poor security. So there's an article there. I think I shared that as well.
you
One thing I
know
noticed, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, one thing I noticed, like, like the hackers do, that one thing is obviously that, it's going to be offshore, but within the offshore, I mean, certain individuals, when I was actually looking at it, the way they have done is they created one company, and then within that company, they created another one, and then another one, and there is a chain of like about 6, 7 companies, and then each one is owned by somebody else, as if you create this connection with the VPN. So you with the VPN to VPN to VPN, and you direct the number to, or you call the number and direct the number to another number to another number. So it takes a little bit longer time to actually investigate that who actually owns it. So it's just like so funny that they actually have done that, thinking that they won't be able to actually get to that who is the original owner of that account. So it's just so funny that they thought that it would never come out.
Tyler, do you want me to read what they had written about South Dakota, the top parts?
Sure.
Okay, it says financial secrecy laws in South Dakota have made the state the spot for foreigners who want to conceal millions in assets. The U.S. government has long been critical of offshore tax havens such as Belize and the British Virgin Islands. However, South Dakota is now attracting vast wealth. South Dakota trusts have quadrupled in the space of 10 years to now $360 billion. Some of the money is tied to offshore-based people and companies accused of human rights abuses and other wrongdoings. Pandora Papers reveal political and corporate leaders from foreign countries have now moved their monies from such tax havens to the American trust companies. Their interests are protected thanks to the state's extreme financial secrecy laws. South Dakota has no income tax, inheritance tax, or capital gains tax, and the finances held there are effectively kept out of the reaches of the U.S. government. And it goes on to the full article.
Okay. Well, I think there might be an update by the time we meet back here. It's in 5 hours from now. We'll meet again. And then, of course, we'll meet again tomorrow, same time. I imagine there will be new updates as the journalists are busy going through millions of documents.
I just wanted to add, Tyler, I don't know if you heard about the big dump as well that came out. I forgot what the name of it was. It was like thousands of documents came out, how the Western companies were shielding a lot of investment. The DeSantos downfall from Angola, or the daughter of the former president of Angola, who literally, became Africa's first female billionaire. But PwC, I think they got in trouble with that, and a lot of high-profile people even resigned, showing that how even Swiss banks and others were helping her just take out a ton of money, and not just Angola but other African countries. How this dump of documents, emails, contracts, and lawyers, all showing thousands and thousands of emails that came out in May of 2021. So, yeah, it's a brave new world, and it's also great for transparency how the African leaders and their siblings and the stuff are stealing that continent to death, but also the Western democratic countries and these consulting firms and lawyers and stuff well known who say something else but help them shield all this. In fact, even design how they can get the money out. So yeah, it's great to see. But I thought that this is quite related to that.
Okay. All right. We'll get back together in 5 hours. Have a nice Subway sandwich break, and we'll see you again a bit later.
Thanks, Tyler.
Happy Wednesday. Happy Monday. Wednesday. It's
Hey,
Monday.
let's
Happy
get that
Monday.
clips. Let's get
Thank
that
you.
clip